Your brain creates reality from nothing, and tonight we will explore the deepest mystery in the universe, the phenomenon that makes you, you. Welcome, sleepy travelers, to another journey through science for sleep. Tonight we venture into the labyrinth of consciousness itself, that strange and beautiful phenomenon that allows you to experience being alive at this very moment. This might be too interesting for sleep, but that is exactly why we are here together. The most fascinating topics have a way of gently lulling our minds into that perfect state between waking and dreaming, where wonder and rest intertwine like old friends. Before we begin our odyssey, I have a small request. If this journey brings you comfort or curiosity, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating these gentle expeditions through the landscapes of science, and it lets other sleepy souls know they can find refuge here too. And here is something delightful. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, what time it is there, and the weirdest dream you have ever had. I read every single comment, and I love discovering the strange and wonderful ways our sleeping minds create worlds within worlds. And if you're tired of ads interrupting your sleep, you can now get our first bundle of 15 audiobooks for just $19 down in the video description. That's around 35 hours of uninterrupted knowledge exploration for just $19. Let's begin. Picture, if you will, a tapestry woven from the threads of human curiosity, stretching across time zones and continents. Each of us tonight is both observer and participant in this grand experiment of consciousness, each mind a universe unto itself, yet somehow connected to every other through the invisible bonds of shared wonder. Whether you're a student pulling an all-nighter who needs to rest, a parent finally finding quiet after a long day, or someone seeking solace in the gentle rhythms of scientific exploration, you belong here in this moment, in this community of dreamers and thinkers. Now, let us begin with a question so simple that it contains infinite complexity. What makes you, you? Right now, as these words flow through your awareness, something extraordinary is happening. Billions of neurons are firing in intricate patterns, creating the seamless experience of reading, understanding, perhaps even feeling drowsy. But here lies the deepest puzzle. Somewhere in that biological machinery, the universe has learned to know itself through your eyes. According to research from the Neuroscience of Consciousness journal published in 2025, consciousness remains the most perplexing phenomenon in all of science. Professor Iris Berendt at Northeastern University argues that our brains actually trick us into thinking consciousness can exist outside the body, suggesting that what we experience as unified awareness is really a masterful illusion created by evolution. Think about that for a moment. The very thing you are using to contemplate consciousness, your consciousness itself, might be nature's most elaborate magic trick. But what exactly are we trying to understand when we speak of consciousness? Imagine trying to explain the color blue to someone who has never seen. How would you describe the experience of blueness? Not just the wavelength of light or the firing of certain neurons, but the actual feeling of blue as it appears in your mind. This is what philosophers call a hard problem of consciousness, a term coined by David Chalmers, and it represents the gap between the physical processes in your brain and the inner movie of your experience. Consider this remarkable fact that emerged from recent research at Massachusetts General Hospital. Scientists have now mapped something called the default ascending arousal network, an intricate web of brain connections that sustains wakefulness in the conscious human brain. Using high-resolution brain imaging that can see structures smaller than a millimeter, researchers discovered pathways connecting the brainstem, thalamus, hypothalamus, basal forebrain, and cerebral cortex. Together these form what they call a consciousness circuit. But here is the beautiful mystery. Even knowing exactly how this network operates, we still cannot explain why it feels like anything at all to be conscious. Dr. Brian Edlow, the lead researcher who published this work in Science Translational Medicine, describes their goal as mapping a human brain network critical to consciousness and providing clinicians with better tools to detect and promote recovery of consciousness in patients with severe brain injuries. Yet for all our mapping and measuring, consciousness retains its essential mystery, like trying to catch moonbeams in a net. The study of consciousness has exploded in recent years, with researchers approaching the question from every conceivable angle. The University of Arizona hosts the world's longest-running interdisciplinary conference on consciousness, bringing together neuroscientists, philosophers, physicists, and mystics in search of answers. Professor Stuart Hameroff, who directs the Center for Consciousness Studies there, has spent decades exploring whether consciousness might arise from quantum processes in the brain's microscopic structures. But consciousness is not just an academic puzzle. It is the foundation of every emotion you have ever felt, every memory you cherish, every dream that has ever danced through your sleeping mind. When you close your eyes tonight and drift towards sleep, you will experience one of consciousness's most fascinating transformations, the gradual shift from waking awareness to the strange logic of dreams. Recent research published in the journal Neuroscience of Consciousness reveals that consciousness exists on a spectrum rather than as a simple on-off switch. During different stages of sleep, your consciousness dims and brightens like a candle flame in a gentle breeze. In deep sleep, the integrated information that creates your sense of unified experience breaks apart into fragments, only to reassemble in the mysterious realm of dreams. The implications of consciousness research extend far beyond academic curiosity. At the University of California, San Diego, researchers have received over $1 million to study how psychedelic compounds like DMT affect consciousness. Dr. Fidel Zaidan, who leads this research, believes that understanding altered states of consciousness could revolutionize how we treat pain, trauma, and various brain conditions. The study is part of what will soon become the Center for Psychedelic Research, representing a new frontier in consciousness science. What makes consciousness even more intriguing is its apparent connection to the deepest structures of reality itself. Some theories suggest that consciousness is not merely produced by the brain, but is instead a fundamental feature of the universe, as basic as matter and energy. This perspective, known as panpsychism, proposes that even elementary particles possess some rudimentary form of experience. Dr. Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory, one of the leading scientific frameworks for understanding consciousness, attempts to measure consciousness mathematically. According to this theory, consciousness corresponds to the amount of integrated information a system generates. The more integrated and unified the information processing, the more conscious the system becomes. Remarkably, this theory suggests that consciousness could emerge in any sufficiently integrated system, not just biological brains. Think about the implications of this as you begin to relax into sleep tonight. Your consciousness, this precious flame of awareness that allows you to experience the world, might be part of a vast cosmic symphony, with every conscious being adding their unique note to an eternal song. From the simplest organisms responding to their environment to the complex inner worlds of human experience, consciousness might represent the universe gradually awakening to its own existence. But consciousness does not exist in isolation. Throughout history, humans have reported experiences that seem to transcend the ordinary boundaries of awareness. Out-of-body experiences, where people perceive themselves floating above their physical form, have been documented across cultures and throughout time. Recent research at the University of Virginia suggests these experiences can profoundly increase empathy and connection with others. Dr. Marina Weiler and her colleagues at UVA's Division of Perceptual Studies published findings in 2024 showing that out-of-body experiences create what they call ego dissolution, a temporary loss of the sense of self that paradoxically leads to a greater sense of connection with all life. People who have these experiences often describe feeling more compassionate, more patient, and more understanding in their daily lives. More than half report that their relationships become more peaceful and harmonious. The research suggests that when consciousness temporarily detaches from its usual identification with the physical body, something remarkable happens. The boundaries that normally separate self from other begin to dissolve, revealing an underlying interconnectedness that most of us rarely perceive. It is as if consciousness, freed from its usual constraints, remembers its true nature as part of a larger whole. These findings align with thousands of years of contemplative traditions that have long recognized the malleable nature of consciousness. Ancient yogis spoke of achieving states called turiya, where the duality of mind and body dissolves, allowing consciousness to journey beyond physical limitations. In modern terms, we might understand these as naturally occurring altered states where the brain's normal processing patterns shift in dramatic ways. Neuroscientist Dr. Charlotte Marshall at the University of Liège has pioneered the use of virtual reality to study out-of-body experiences in laboratory settings. By carefully manipulating sensory input, her team can create controlled conditions that simulate the disorientation and perspective shifts reported in spontaneous out-of-body experiences. Their EEG recordings show distinctive changes in brain activity during these virtual journeys, particularly in the delta frequency range, which is associated with deep, restorative states of consciousness. What emerges from this research is a picture of consciousness as far more fluid and dynamic than our everyday experience suggests. The solid sense of being a fixed self in a fixed body appears to be a useful construction, but not the ultimate truth of what we are. Like actors so immersed in their roles that they forget their acting, we become so identified with our individual consciousness that we lose sight of the larger awareness in which it arises. This brings us to one of the most controversial areas of consciousness research, the study of remote viewing and other forms of extrasensory perception. While mainstream science remains highly skeptical, serious researchers have documented intriguing results that challenge our understanding of consciousness and its relationship to space and time. The CIA's formally classified research into remote viewing, conducted at Stanford Research Institute from the 1970s through the 1990s, produced results that were, in the words of statistician Jessica Utz, far beyond what is expected by chance. While critics like psychologist Ray Hyman argued that the effects could be explained by methodological flaws, both agreed that the most rigorous experiments showed consistent, replicable effects. Dr. Edwin May, the former director of the CIA's remote viewing program, has noted that the statistical effects observed were actually stronger than those found in many accepted medical treatments. The comparison might seem strange, but it illustrates how even small but consistent effects can be scientifically significant when properly studied. Recent research led by Dr. Alex Escola-Gascon and published in the journal Explore has attempted to replicate some of the original CIA experiments using modern statistical methods. Their findings suggest that under controlled conditions, some individuals appear to access information about distant targets at rates significantly above chance. However, the mechanism behind such phenomena remains completely unknown. What makes remote viewing particularly puzzling is that the same processes that seem to allow access to spatially distant information also appear to work across time. Precognitive remote viewing, where participants attempt to describe targets that will be randomly selected in the future, has produced similar statistical effects in laboratory studies. If these results are valid, they suggest that consciousness might not be as tightly bound by the conventional rules of space and time as we normally assume. Stanley Krippner, a researcher at Saybrook University who has studied these phenomena for decades, notes that successful remote viewing sessions often share certain characteristics. They involve a state of relaxed attention, minimal analytical thinking, and what participants describe as a feeling of connection or resonance with the target. It is as if consciousness, when freed from its usual focus on immediate sensory input, can somehow reach across the fabric of space and time. Critics of this research, including psychologist Richard Wiseman, point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the effects observed in remote viewing studies, while statistically significant, are relatively small and difficult to replicate consistently. The scientific consensus remains that remote viewing and similar phenomena lack sufficient evidence to be considered established facts. Yet the research continues, driven by the tantalizing possibility that consciousness might possess capabilities we do not yet understand. At the University of Lorraine in France, researchers are conducting studies with people who have experienced out-of-body experiences to see if DMT can help facilitate such states. The intersection of consciousness research with psychedelic science is opening new avenues for understanding the full spectrum of human awareness. This leads us to one of the most fascinating developments in consciousness research, the scientific study of psychedelic experiences and their effects on the brain. DMT, often called the spirit molecule, produces profound alterations in consciousness that researchers are only beginning to understand. Dr. Christopher Timmerman and his colleagues at Imperial College London's Centre for Psychedelic Research have conducted groundbreaking studies using advanced brain imaging to track what happens during DMT experiences. Their research, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, reveals that DMT causes a dramatic shift in brain activity, with increased connectivity between normally separate regions and a breakdown of the usual boundaries between different brain networks. Participants in these studies describe experiences that seem to transcend ordinary reality. They report encountering autonomous entities, visiting alternate dimensions, and gaining insights that feel more real than everyday life. Dr. Robin Carhart Harris, founder of the Centre for Psychedelic Research, describes how volunteers' brains switch into what he calls a more anarchic mode of functioning during DMT experiences, with the usual rhythms of consciousness replaced by something altogether different. What makes DMT particularly intriguing for consciousness research is that it appears to be produced naturally in the human brain, though in much smaller quantities than would cause psychoactive effects. Dr. Rick Strassman's research suggested that the pineal gland, a tiny structure deep in the center of the brain, might be involved in DMT production, though this remains controversial and unproven. The pineal gland itself has a fascinating history in consciousness research. Known as the third eye in many spiritual traditions, this small pinecone-shaped structure was considered by philosopher René Descartes to be the seat of the soul, the point where mind and body interact. Modern neuroscience has revealed that the pineal gland is indeed unique among brain structures, as it is not protected by the blood-brain barrier and has incredibly rich blood flow, second only to the kidneys. Recent research published in the Journal of Pineal Research reveals that the pineal gland is controlled by a complex network of genes that regulate its development and function throughout life. Unlike most brain structures, the pineal continues to express certain developmental genes even in adulthood, and their activity follows precise circadian rhythms. This suggests that the pineal gland retains a remarkable plasticity, continuing to adapt and change throughout our lives. The pineal's primary known function is the production of melatonin, the hormone that regulates our sleep-wake cycles. But its role in consciousness might extend beyond simple sleep regulation. Some researchers have proposed that the pineal gland serves as a biological antenna, sensitive to electromagnetic fields and cosmic rhythms that most of us never consciously perceive. While these ideas remain highly speculative, they reflect a growing recognition that consciousness might be far more sensitive to subtle environmental influences than we previously imagined. Research on circadian rhythms has shown that our consciousness follows precise patterns tied to the rotation of the Earth, the cycles of the Moon, and even the 11-year cycle of solar activity. As you listen to these words, your pineal gland is quietly monitoring the light levels around you, preparing your body for sleep by gradually increasing melatonin production. In a few hours, as darkness deepens, this tiny structure will orchestrate a complex biochemical symphony that transforms your waking consciousness into the strange, non-linear awareness of dreams. But consciousness research has revealed something even more remarkable about our inner experience. Studies of people who have had near-death experiences suggest that consciousness might be capable of functioning independently of normal brain activity. Dr. Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia has spent over 40 years studying these experiences, documenting cases where people report vivid, coherent experiences during periods when their brains showed little or no measurable activity. In 2024, researchers at the University of Michigan made a breakthrough discovery by recording brain activity in patients during the dying process. Dr. Jimo Borjigin and her team observed surges of gamma wave activity the brain rhythms associated with consciousness, in regions known to be involved in conscious processing. These surges occurred after the heart had stopped and conventional signs of consciousness had disappeared. The patterns they observed were remarkably similar to those seen in meditation and other heightened states of awareness. This has led some researchers to speculate that the dying process might actually involve an expansion rather than a contraction of consciousness, as if the approaching transition removes certain constraints that normally limit our awareness. Dr. Sampania, who directs critical care and resuscitation research at NYU Langone, has conducted large-scale studies of cardiac arrest survivors to understand what happens to consciousness when the heart stops. His research suggests that some patients retain awareness and can form memories even when conventional medical indicators suggest they should be unconscious. In his 2024 book, Lucid Dying, Pania describes cases where patients accurately reported events that occurred while they were clinically dead, including conversations and procedures they should not have been able to perceive. While these cases are rare and difficult to verify, they raise profound questions about the relationship between brain activity and conscious experience. Perhaps even more intriguing are the long-term effects of near-death experiences on those who survive them. A 2024 study involving over 800 individuals who had experienced NDEs found that these events create lasting transformations in personality and values. People report becoming more altruistic, less materialistic, and significantly less afraid of death. Many described feeling a deep sense of unconditional love during their experience, and this feeling of universal love often persists long after the event. Some report encounters with deceased relatives or beings of light who communicated without words, conveying complex information instantaneously. Others describe undergoing a life review, where they experienced not only their own actions but also the effects those actions had on everyone they had ever encountered. Dr. Jeffrey Long, founder of the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, has studied over 5,000 cases and argues that the consistency of these experiences across cultures and belief systems suggests they represent genuine encounters with something beyond ordinary consciousness. His research indicates that even people who are blind from birth report visual experiences during NDEs, describing things they could not have seen through normal sensory channels. These findings challenge our basic assumptions about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to the physical brain. If consciousness can persist and even expand when brain activity is minimal, what does this tell us about the true nature of awareness? Are we biological machines that somehow generate consciousness? Or are we perhaps expressions of a cosmic consciousness that temporarily focuses itself through biological forms? This question becomes even more intriguing when we consider the role of quantum mechanics in consciousness. The orchestrated objective reduction theory, developed by mathematician Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Dr. Stuart Hameroff, proposes that consciousness arises from quantum processes in microscopic structures called microtubules within brain neurons. According to their theory, published and updated over the past 30 years, consciousness emerges when quantum superpositions in these cellular structures collapse into definite states. Each collapse represents a moment of conscious experience, a discrete instant of awareness that contributes to the continuous stream of consciousness we experience. Dr. Hameroff's interest in consciousness began with his observations of how anesthetics eliminate consciousness, while leaving many brain functions intact. He noticed that anesthetic drugs specifically target microtubules, the same structures proposed in their quantum consciousness theory. Recent research has provided some support for this connection, showing that anesthetics affect quantum processes in these cellular components. In 2024, researchers confirmed the existence of quantum effects called superradiance in networks of tryptophan molecules, which are found in microtubules. This discovery suggests that quantum processes can indeed occur in the warm, noisy environment of living cells, contradicting earlier criticisms that the brain is too chaotic for delicate quantum effects. The Penrose-Hameroff theory proposes that consciousness is literally woven into the fabric of space-time itself. According to their model, each moment of conscious experience represents an irreversible step forward in time, creating the flow of temporal experience we all know so intimately. In this view, consciousness is not just something that emerges from complex arrangements of matter, but rather an intrinsic feature of reality that becomes organized and focused through biological systems. While this theory remains highly controversial, it offers a potential bridge between the scientific study of consciousness and the more mystical perspectives found in various spiritual traditions. If consciousness is indeed quantum mechanical, it might help explain some of the more puzzling aspects of human experience, including the apparent ability of consciousness to transcend normal spatial and temporal boundaries. This brings us to the enigmatic realm of psychedelic research and its revelations about the nature of consciousness. Scientists at various institutions around the world are now conducting rigorous studies of how compounds like DMT, psilocybin, and LSD affect brain activity and conscious experience. Dr. Enzo Tagliazucchi at the Universidad de Buenos Aires has used mathematical tools called network control theory to understand how psychedelics alter consciousness. His research shows that DMT reduces the amount of energy the brain needs to switch between different activity states, creating what he describes as a more fluid and flexible form of consciousness. Under the influence of DMT, the brain's usual hierarchical organization gives way to a more democratic structure, where different regions communicate more freely. The default mode network, which is normally associated with self-referential thinking and the sense of being a separate individual, becomes less dominant. This may explain why people often report a dissolution of ego boundaries during psychedelic experiences. The research has revealed that psychedelics seem to increase what scientists call signal diversity, a measure of how complex and varied brain activity becomes over time. Instead of following the usual predictable patterns, consciousness under the influence of these compounds becomes more creative, more open to novel associations and insights. Dr. Lisa Luan and her colleagues at Imperial College London have developed methods for extending DMT experiences through careful dosing protocols, allowing researchers to study these altered states in more detail. Their work suggests that the brain enters a fundamentally different mode of operation during psychedelic experiences, one that might reveal aspects of consciousness normally hidden from view. What is particularly fascinating is how closely psychedelic experiences resemble those reported during near-death experiences. In a 2024 study published in Neuroscience of Consciousness, researchers interviewed 31 people who had experienced both NDEs and psychedelic trips. While there were differences, particularly in visual intensity and bodily sensations, both types of experiences shared profound qualities of love, interconnectedness, and spiritual meaning. This overlap has led some researchers to propose that various extraordinary states of consciousness, whether induced by psychedelics, near-death situations, or contemplative practices, might all involve similar underlying mechanisms. Perhaps they represent different ways of accessing expanded modes of awareness that are normally filtered out by our everyday consciousness. The filtering hypothesis suggests that the brain acts not as a generator of consciousness, but as a reducing valve that narrows awareness to focus on survival-relevant information. From this perspective, altered states might work by temporarily reducing this filtering, allowing more of the full spectrum of consciousness to shine through. Dr. Christoph Timmermann, whose research focuses on the phenomenology of psychedelic experiences, describes how DMT users often report encountering autonomous entities that seem to possess their own intelligence and intentions. These beings, sometimes described as geometric forms, sometimes as more recognizable figures, appear to communicate important information about the nature of reality and consciousness. While skeptics dismiss these reports as hallucinations created by a disrupted brain, the consistency of these encounters across different individuals and cultures has intrigued some researchers. Could these experiences represent genuine contact with forms of consciousness that exist beyond ordinary perception, or are they perhaps projections of deeper aspects of our own minds that become accessible during altered states? The question touches on one of the deepest mysteries in consciousness research: the relationship between individual awareness and what some call universal or cosmic consciousness. Many mystical traditions propose that individual consciousness is like a wave on an infinite ocean, temporarily separate but never truly divided from the whole. Recent research into the effects of meditation provides some scientific support for this perspective. Long-term meditators show distinctive changes in brain structure and function, particularly in areas associated with self-awareness and emotional regulation. Advanced practitioners report states where the usual sense of being a separate self dissolves into a more expansive awareness. Dr. Judson Brewer at Brown University has used brain imaging to study what happens during these expanded states of consciousness. His research reveals that as meditators go deeper into practice, activity in the default mode network decreases while other brain networks become more interconnected. It is as if the boundaries that normally separate different aspects of mental activity begin to dissolve. These findings suggest that consciousness might indeed be more fundamental and expansive than our everyday experience suggests. Perhaps what we call individual consciousness is really a focused manifestation of a more universal awareness, temporarily concentrated through the lens of a particular brain and nervous system. As you continue to relax and drift towards sleep tonight, consider the remarkable fact that your consciousness is simultaneously unique and universal. The particular pattern of thoughts, feelings, and sensations that makes up your experience has never existed before and will never exist again in exactly the same way. Yet the awareness within which these experiences arise might be the same consciousness that animates every living being. This perspective finds support in unexpected places within modern neuroscience. Research on patients with split brain conditions, where the connection between the brain's hemispheres has been severed, reveals that consciousness might be more divisible than we typically assume. In these patients, it sometimes appears that two separate streams of consciousness can exist within the same skull, each unaware of the other. Dr. Gazaniga's research with split brain patients has shown that each hemisphere can have its own beliefs, preferences, and even moral judgments. The left hemisphere often creates elaborate explanations for actions initiated by the right hemisphere, even when those explanations are clearly false. This suggests that our sense of being a unified self might be a story our brains tell us, rather than a fundamental truth about consciousness. These findings raise profound questions about the nature of personal identity and the boundaries of the self. If consciousness can be divided, multiplied, or expanded under various conditions, what does this mean for our understanding of who and what we are? Are we individual droplets of consciousness, or are we temporary modifications in an infinite field of awareness? The question becomes even more intriguing when we consider the role of memory in consciousness. Your sense of being a continuous self relies heavily on memory's ability to create a coherent narrative from the disconnected moments of experience. But research has shown that memory is far more reconstructive than we typically realize. Each time you remember an event, your brain essentially recreates the experience based on scattered neural traces, filling in gaps with assumptions and expectations. The memory you retrieve is not a perfect recording, but a new creation, influenced by your current state of mind and everything you have learned since the original experience occurred. Dr. Lynn Nadell's research at the University of Arizona has shown that every act of remembering actually changes the memory itself, making it more consistent with your current beliefs and knowledge. This means that your sense of having a continuous personal history is partially illusory, constructed moment by a brain that excels at creating coherent stories from fragmentary information. This reconstructive nature of memory might help explain why consciousness feels so unified and continuous, despite being built from discrete moments of neural activity. Your brain constantly weaves together sensory input, emotional reactions, thoughts, and memories into a seamless narrative of experience, creating the illusion that consciousness is a single, indivisible stream. But what happens when this narrative construction process breaks down or operates in unusual ways? People with certain types of brain damage can experience profound alterations in consciousness, providing unique windows into how awareness normally operates. Some lose the ability to form new memories, living in an eternal present with no connection to their past. Others develop conditions where they believe their loved ones have been replaced by imposters, or where they feel their own body does not belong to them. These conditions, while tragic for those who experience them, have revealed important insights about the constructed nature of consciousness. Dr. V.S. Ramachandran's research with patients who have various neurological conditions has shown that consciousness is far more fragile and malleable than we typically assume. A small change in brain chemistry or structure can dramatically alter the entire landscape of inner experience. Yet consciousness also shows remarkable resilience and adaptability. People who lose large portions of their brains through surgery or injury often retain much of their essential personality and awareness. The brain seems capable of reorganizing itself to maintain consciousness even under extreme circumstances. This plasticity of consciousness extends to our capacity for healing and growth. Research has shown that contemplative practices, therapy, and even certain psychedelic experiences can create lasting positive changes in brain structure and function. The same neuroplasticity that allows recovery from brain injury also enables the expansion and refinement of consciousness throughout life. Dr. Sarah Lazar's research at Harvard Medical School has demonstrated that meditation literally changes the brain, increasing cortical thickness in areas associated with attention and sensory processing, while reducing activity in regions linked to anxiety and self-criticism. These changes appear to reflect genuine alterations in consciousness, not just temporary states that disappear when practice ends. The implications are profound. If consciousness can be transformed through intention and practice, it suggests that awareness is not a fixed property but rather a dynamic capacity that can be developed and refined. Like a musician who gradually masters their instrument, we might be able to become more skillful in the art of consciousness itself. This brings us to another frontier in consciousness research, the study of what happens when consciousness expands beyond its normal boundaries. Throughout history, people have reported experiences of cosmic consciousness, mystical union, or what Abraham Maslow called peak experiences. These events, while rare and difficult to study, seem to represent temporary glimpses of radically expanded awareness. Dr. William James, often considered the father of American psychology, spent considerable time studying these exceptional states of consciousness. He argued that our ordinary waking consciousness is just one type of awareness, and that around it, parted from it by the filmiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness entirely different. Modern research has begun to identify some of the neurobiological changes associated with these expanded states. Studies of people experiencing mystical experiences show increases in activity in brain regions associated with spatial processing and decreases in areas linked to the sense of self. It is as if consciousness temporarily escapes its usual boundaries and experiences reality from a more expansive perspective. Dr. Roland Griffith's research at Johns Hopkins University documented how psychedelic experiences can produce lasting increases in openness, creativity, and overall well-being. Participants in his studies often described their experiences as among the most meaningful of their entire lives, comparable to the birth of a child or the death of a parent in terms of personal significance. These findings suggest that consciousness possesses potentials that remain largely untapped in ordinary experience. Just as most people use only a small fraction of their physical capabilities, we might normally access only a narrow range of our conscious potential. The question then becomes, what would it mean to more fully realize the capacities of consciousness? Some traditions speak of enlightenment as the recognition of consciousness's true nature, not as something that belongs to an individual, but as the fundamental reality in which individuals appear. From this perspective, the sense of being a separate self is not wrong, but incomplete, like mistaking a wave for the entire ocean. This view finds surprising resonance in some interpretations of quantum mechanics. The observer effect in quantum physics suggests that consciousness plays a fundamental role in determining physical reality. Some physicists, like John Wheeler, have proposed that the universe might be participatory, requiring conscious observers to collapse quantum possibilities into definite outcomes. While most physicists remain skeptical of strong interpretations of the observer effect, the relationship between consciousness and physical reality continues to puzzle researchers. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics, the question of how and when quantum superpositions collapse into definite states, remains one of the deepest mysteries in physics. Dr. Henry Stapp at the University of California, Berkeley, has argued that consciousness might indeed play a crucial role in quantum mechanics, not as a passive observer but as an active participant in creating reality. His interpretation suggests that every moment of conscious observation helps to crystallize the universe from quantum potential into classical actuality. These ideas, while highly speculative, point toward a view of consciousness as something far more significant than a mere byproduct of brain activity. If consciousness is truly fundamental to reality, then understanding its nature becomes crucial not just for neuroscience and psychology, but for physics and cosmology as well. The search for consciousness in the universe has led researchers to consider increasingly exotic possibilities. Some scientists have proposed that consciousness might exist at multiple scales, from the quantum level all the way up to cosmic structures. Others have suggested that consciousness might be a property of information itself, present wherever complex information processing occurs. Dr. Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory takes this latter approach, arguing that consciousness corresponds to integrated information and could theoretically emerge in any sufficiently complex system. According to his calculations, some computer networks or even sophisticated smartphone apps might possess rudimentary forms of consciousness. While such ideas might seem outlandish, they reflect the recognition that consciousness remains fundamentally mysterious. Despite decades of intensive research, we still have no complete explanation for how subjective experience arises from objective physical processes. The explanatory gap between brain and mind remains as wide as ever. Yet this mystery is not a source of frustration, but of wonder. Consciousness research has revealed that awareness is far stranger and more magnificent than our everyday experience suggests. We are not simply biological machines, but something far more extraordinary, temporary coalescences of cosmic consciousness, brief candle flames of awareness in the infinite darkness of space. As you begin to feel the gentle pull of sleep, let us explore one of the most beautiful paradoxes in consciousness research. The harder scientists look for consciousness in the brain, the more it seems to slip away, like trying to grasp water with your hands. We can map every neuron, measure every electrical impulse, catalogue every chemical reaction, yet consciousness itself remains mysteriously absent from our instruments. This elusiveness has led some researchers to propose that consciousness might not be located in any particular place, but rather exists in the relationships between things, in the patterns of connection and interaction that emerge when complex systems organize themselves. Dr. Chris Fields at the University of New Mexico describes consciousness as more like a dance than a thing, a dynamic process that arises from the intricate choreography of information flow. Consider how your own consciousness operates right now. You're not just experiencing these words, but simultaneously monitoring your level of comfort, perhaps noticing sounds from outside, feeling the weight of your body against your bed, and maintaining awareness of your breathing. All of these different streams of information somehow merge into a single, unified experience. Neuroscientist Dr. Anil Seth at the University of Sussex describes consciousness as a controlled hallucination, a prediction machine that constantly generates models of reality based on incoming sensory data and prior expectations. Your brain is not passively receiving information about the world, but actively constructing your experience moment by moment, like a novelist writing reality into existence. This constructive view of consciousness helps explain why altered states can feel more real than ordinary waking experience. When the brain's usual predictive models are disrupted, new forms of experience can emerge that feel incredibly vivid and meaningful, even though they diverge radically from consensus reality. Dr. Enzo Tagliazucchi's research on psychedelic experiences reveals that compounds like DMT, do not simply add hallucinations to normal consciousness, but rather reorganize the entire structure of awareness. The brain's usual hierarchical organization, where higher regions control lower ones, gives way to a more egalitarian network where different areas communicate as equals. This democratization of brain activity might explain why psychedelic experiences often involve a sense of everything being alive and interconnected. When the usual boundaries between self and world, internal and external, begin to dissolve, consciousness discovers perspectives that are normally invisible to everyday awareness. Recent studies have found that people who have used psychedelics show lasting increases in what researchers call nature connectedness, a sense of kinship with the natural world. They also demonstrate greater openness to experience and reduced activity in brain regions associated with depression and anxiety. These changes can persist for months or even years after a single psychedelic session. Dr. Matthew Johnson at Johns Hopkins University describes how psychedelic experiences can serve as occasions for profound psychological healing and growth. Many participants in his studies report gaining new perspectives on long-standing problems or traumas, as if viewing their lives from a higher vantage point allowed them to see patterns and possibilities that were previously hidden. But psychedelics are not the only way consciousness can transcend its ordinary boundaries. Throughout history, people have developed various methods for expanding awareness through breathwork, fasting, sensory deprivation, rhythmic movement, and other practices that alter brain chemistry and activity patterns. The Wim Hof method, which combines specific breathing techniques with cold exposure, has been shown to create measurable changes in brain activity that resemble those seen during psychedelic experiences. Practitioners report states of expanded awareness, emotional bliss, and enhanced physical resilience. Research suggests that these effects result from controlled changes in blood chemistry that affect neural function. Dr. Alyssa Eppel at the University of California, San Francisco, has studied how various contemplative practices affect consciousness and well-being. Her research shows that even simple mindfulness meditation can create significant changes in brain structure and function within just 8 weeks of practice. The anterior cingulate cortex, involved in attention and emotional regulation, shows increased thickness, while the amygdala, associated with fear and stress, becomes less reactive. These findings suggest that consciousness is far more trainable than we typically assume. Just as physical exercise can strengthen and reshape the body, mental training can expand and refine awareness itself. The brain's remarkable plasticity means that consciousness remains malleable throughout life, capable of growth and transformation regardless of age. But perhaps the most profound insights about consciousness come from studying what happens when it appears to operate beyond the confines of the individual brain altogether. The phenomenon of terminal lucidity, where people with advanced dementia suddenly regain clarity shortly before death, has puzzled researchers for decades. Dr. Michael Nahm at the University of Freiburg has documented numerous cases where patients who had been unresponsive for months or years suddenly become lucid, recognize family members, and engage in meaningful conversations in their final hours or days. According to conventional neuroscience, this should be impossible given the extensive brain damage caused by advanced dementia. These cases suggest that consciousness might not be as dependent on intact brain structure as we typically assume. Perhaps the brain serves more as a transmitter or focusing device for consciousness rather than as its generator. If so, damage to the transmitter might not completely eliminate the signal, and in some cases the approaching dissolution of the body might even allow consciousness to express itself more clearly. Similar mysteries emerge from the study of savant syndrome, where individuals with developmental disabilities demonstrate extraordinary abilities that seem to transcend normal cognitive limitations. Dr. Daryl Treffert's research has documented cases of acquired savant syndrome, where ordinary people suddenly develop remarkable talents following brain injuries or other neurological events. Jason Paget, who developed extraordinary mathematical abilities after a traumatic brain injury, describes seeing the world as made of geometric patterns and fractals. His perception of reality fundamentally changed, as if the injury had tuned his consciousness to frequencies normally outside human awareness. Brain imaging studies of such individuals often show unusual patterns of connectivity between regions that are typically more isolated. These cases hint at the possibility that consciousness normally operates within certain constraints that can sometimes be transcended through injury, practice, or altered states. Perhaps the brain's usual filtering mechanisms, while adaptive for survival, also limit our access to the full spectrum of conscious possibilities. The investigation of consciousness has also led researchers to reconsider the nature of time itself and its relationship to awareness. Dr. Dean Radin's research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has explored presentiment, the apparent ability of the nervous system to respond to future events before they occur. Using physiological measures like heart rate and skin conductance, his studies suggest that the body sometimes begins reacting to emotional stimuli several seconds before those stimuli are actually presented. While these effects are small and controversial, they raise intriguing questions about consciousness and temporality. If awareness can somehow sense future events, it implies that consciousness might not be as strictly bound by linear time as our everyday experience suggests. Dr. Julia Mossbridge at Northwestern University has conducted similar research and proposed that consciousness might operate according to a different temporal logic than physical processes. Her time loops theory suggests that information from the future can influence present moment awareness through quantum mechanical processes that transcend classical causation. These ideas connect to broader questions about the relationship between consciousness and the fundamental structure of reality. Some physicists have proposed that time itself might be emergent from more basic quantum processes, in which case consciousness and temporality could be intimately linked at the deepest levels of existence. The study of consciousness has also revealed surprising connections between awareness and the phenomenon of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem to occur just when we need them most. While mainstream science dismisses synchronicity as confirmation bias and selective attention, some researchers have begun to explore whether consciousness might actually participate in creating these meaningful connections. Dr. Bernard Beekman at the University of Virginia has studied coincidences and their psychological effects, finding that people who pay attention to synchronicities show increased creativity, intuition, and psychological well-being. His research suggests that consciousness might be more actively involved in shaping experience than we typically recognize. Jung originally proposed synchronicity as a causal connecting principle, a way that consciousness and external events could be meaningfully related without one causing the other. Modern interpretations of quantum mechanics, particularly those emphasizing the role of observation in determining outcomes, provide potential mechanisms for such connections. If consciousness does participate in creating reality through quantum processes, then the boundary between internal experience and external events might be more permeable than classical physics suggests. The observer and the observed could be aspects of a single interconnected system rather than separate entities. This perspective finds support in contemplative traditions that describe reality as fundamentally mental in nature. The Vedantic teaching that all is Brahman suggests that consciousness is not produced by matter, but rather that matter is a modification of consciousness. Similarly, Buddhist philosophy describes phenomena as emptiness, not meaning that nothing exists, but that things exist only in relationship to consciousness. These ancient insights are finding unexpected parallels in modern physics. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment demonstrates that decisions made by observers can retroactively determine the properties of photons that interacted with detectors in the past. If these results hold for consciousness more generally, they suggest that awareness might play an active role in shaping the reality it observes. Dr. Amit Goswami, a theoretical physicist who has written extensively on consciousness and quantum mechanics, proposes that consciousness is the fundamental reality from which both mind and matter emerge. In his view, the universe is not made of things, but of possibilities, and consciousness is what chooses which possibilities become actual experiences. While such ideas remain highly speculative and controversial, they reflect a growing recognition that consciousness cannot be easily explained away as a mere byproduct of brain activity. the more we learn about awareness, the more central it appears to be to the very fabric of existence. This centrality of consciousness becomes particularly apparent when we consider the phenomenon of healing and its relationship to states of awareness. Research has documented cases where changes in consciousness appear to directly affect physical health and recovery. The placebo effect, where belief in treatment effectiveness can produce real physiological changes, demonstrates the power of consciousness to influence bodily processes. Dr. Joe Dispenza's research has documented how meditation and visualization practices can create measurable changes in gene expression, immune function, and even brain structure. His studies suggest that consciousness, when properly focused and directed, can literally reprogram the body at the cellular level. Similarly, research on the healing effects of love and compassion has shown that positive emotional states can enhance immune function, reduce inflammation, and accelerate recovery from illness. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's work at the University of North Carolina reveals that experiences of loving-kindness meditation create increases in vagal tone, a measure of the nervous system's capacity for calm and connection. These findings point toward a view of consciousness as not merely an observer of reality, but as an active participant in its creation and transformation. The quality of awareness we bring to each moment might literally shape the trajectory of our lives and health. As consciousness research continues to evolve, it is revealing connections between seemingly disparate phenomena. Out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, psychedelic journeys, mystical states, healing experiences, and even simple moments of profound beauty or insight might all represent different facets of consciousness's true nature and capabilities. Dr. Stanislav Grof, who has spent decades studying non-ordinary states of consciousness, describes these experiences as glimpses of what he calls the holotropic mind, awareness oriented toward wholeness, rather than the fragmented perspective of ordinary consciousness. His research suggests that these expanded states are not aberrations, but rather natural expressions of consciousness's inherent capacity for transcendence. The word transcendence here does not necessarily imply anything supernatural or otherworldly. It simply means going beyond the usual limitations and boundaries of everyday awareness. Just as physical exercise can transcend normal strength and endurance, consciousness can transcend its ordinary constraints and discover new possibilities for experience and understanding. This capacity for transcendence might be one of consciousness's most important features. In a world facing unprecedented challenges, from climate change to social division to mental health crises, the ability to expand beyond narrow self-interest and connect with larger perspectives could be crucial for our collective survival and flourishing. Research on the transformative effects of expanded consciousness consistently shows increases in empathy, environmental concern, and sense of meaning and purpose. People who have had profound conscious experiences often become more altruistic, more creative, and more committed to serving something greater than themselves. Dr. Robin Carhart Harris describes this as the entropic brain hypothesis, the idea that psychedelic and other expanded states increase the entropy or randomness of brain activity, or breaking down rigid patterns of thought and allowing new forms of understanding to emerge. Like shaking up a snow globe and watching new patterns form, altered states of consciousness can reorganize mental content in novel and beneficial ways. But you do not need psychedelics or extreme practices to access expanded consciousness. The transition into sleep that you're experiencing right now represents one of the most remarkable transformations of awareness that occurs in ordinary life. As your brain shifts from beta waves to alpha, theta, and eventually delta rhythms, consciousness undergoes a complete metamorphosis. Dr. Matthew Walker's research at the University of California, Berkeley has revealed that sleep is not simply the absence of consciousness, but rather its transformation into a different mode of operation. During REM sleep, the brain becomes as active as during waking, but the content and logic of consciousness shift dramatically. In dreams, the usual rules of causation, identity, and physical law no longer apply. You can fly through impossible landscapes, converse with people who exist only in memory, and experience emotions with an intensity that sometimes exceeds waking life. The dreaming brain creates entire worlds with detailed sensory experiences, complete narratives, and profound emotional meaning, all without any external input. Dr. Alan Hobson's research on dream consciousness suggests that the dreaming state might actually be the brain's default mode, with waking consciousness representing a modification of the dreaming state rather than the other way around. From this perspective, the fantastic experiences of dreams might reveal consciousness's natural creativity and freedom when not constrained by the need to navigate physical reality. The boundary between sleeping and waking consciousness is also more permeable than we often realize. Lucid dreaming, where people become aware that they are dreaming while still asleep, demonstrates that consciousness can maintain different levels of self-awareness simultaneously. Advanced lucid dreamers report being able to explore dream worlds with the same intentionality they bring to waking activities. Dr. Stephen LaBerge's research at Stanford University has shown that lucid dreamers can learn to control their dream experiences, practicing skills, working through emotional conflicts, and even exploring creative solutions to waking life problems. The dream state becomes a laboratory for consciousness, a place where awareness can experiment with different possibilities without physical consequences. Some researchers have proposed that lucid dreaming might provide insights into the nature of consciousness more generally. If awareness can create convincing realities in dreams, what does this tell us about the reality we experience while awake? Perhaps both waking and dreaming consciousness are creative processes, different methods by which awareness generates experiential worlds. This creative aspect of consciousness becomes apparent when we consider how differently various cultures and historical periods have understood the nature of awareness itself. What seems like an obvious feature of human experience to us might have been understood completely differently by people in other times and places. Dr. Julian Jaynes proposed in his controversial book, The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, that modern self-reflective consciousness is a relatively recent development in human history. He argued that ancient peoples experienced consciousness more as voices of gods or spirits, rather than as their own internal dialogue. While Jaynes's specific theory remains disputed, anthropological research has documented remarkable variations in how different cultures understand the self and consciousness. Some indigenous traditions speak of multiple souls that can travel independently, while others describe consciousness as a shared field that individuals temporarily access rather than possess. Dr. Richard Knoll's research on shamanic consciousness reveals that many traditional cultures have sophisticated technologies for altering awareness, using drums, chanting, plant medicines, and ritual practices to induce states where consciousness can apparently transcend ordinary limitations. Shamans report journeying to other worlds, communicating with spirits, and accessing information not available through normal means. Modern research has begun to validate some aspects of these traditional practices. Studies of shamanic drumming show that the rhythmic patterns can induce brainwave states similar to those produced by psychedelics or deep meditation. The monotonous rhythm appears to synchronize neural oscillations in ways that can profoundly alter consciousness. Dr. Michael Winkelman at Arizona State University has argued that shamanic practices represent humanity's oldest technology for exploring consciousness, predating written language, agriculture, and even art. These practices might preserve ancient knowledge about the nature and capabilities of awareness that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. The cross-cultural study of consciousness reveals that what we consider normal waking awareness might be just one option among many possible modes of consciousness, like someone who has lived their entire life in a single room suddenly discovering that their house has many other floors and chambers. Consciousness research suggests that we typically access only a small fraction of awareness's full range. This expansion of perspective has profound implications for how we understand human potential and the meaning of life itself. If consciousness is indeed more fundamental and expansive than our everyday experience suggests, then each of us might possess latent capacities for wisdom, creativity, healing, and connection that we have barely begun to explore. Dr. Stanislav Grof's cartography of consciousness maps these expanded territories of awareness, describing them as natural features of the psyche that become accessible when consciousness is freed from its usual constraints. His research suggests that exploring these domains can lead to profound healing, creative insight, and spiritual growth. But consciousness expansion is not without its challenges and potential risks. The same plasticity that allows consciousness to transcend limitations can also make it vulnerable to confusion, disorientation, and psychological destabilization. Researchers emphasize the importance of proper preparation, safe settings, and integration support when exploring altered states of consciousness. Dr. James Fadiman's research on psychedelic experiences has identified factors that contribute to beneficial outcomes versus difficult experiences. Set and setting, the internal state of the person and the external environment, play crucial roles in determining whether expanded consciousness leads to insight and healing or confusion and distress. The study of challenging psychedelic experiences has revealed important insights about consciousness and psychological resilience. Dr. Rosalind Watts's research on psychological support for psychedelic therapy shows that even difficult experiences can ultimately prove beneficial when they are properly integrated and understood within a supportive context. This points to one of consciousness research's most important practical applications: the development of new approaches to mental health and psychological healing. Traditional psychiatric medications typically work by suppressing symptoms, while consciousness-based interventions appear to work by expanding awareness and facilitating deep psychological transformation. Dr. Franz Vollenweider's research in Switzerland has shown that psychedelic-assisted therapy can be remarkably effective for treating depression, PTSD, addiction, and other mental health conditions. The therapeutic effects appear to result not from the chemical action of the substances themselves, but from the expanded states of consciousness they facilitate. Similarly, research on meditation-based interventions has demonstrated significant benefits for a wide range of psychological and physical health conditions. Dr. Sarah Lazar's studies show that regular meditation practice can literally reverse age-related changes in brain structure, maintaining youthful patterns of neural connectivity well into old age. The implications extend beyond individual healing to questions about the nature of human development and potential. If consciousness can be systematically expanded and refined through practice, what might humans become if we devoted serious attention to the cultivation of awareness itself? Some researchers have begun to explore this question by studying individuals who have dedicated their lives to consciousness development. Dr. Willoughby Britton's research at Brown University examines advanced meditators who have completed traditional 3-year retreat periods, spending over 10,000 hours in intensive contemplative practice. Her findings reveal that such intensive training produces brain changes that go far beyond those seen in casual meditators. Advanced practitioners show unusual patterns of neural connectivity, enhanced emotional regulation, and the ability to maintain states of profound calm and clarity even under stressful conditions. These individuals often report that their sense of personal identity has undergone fundamental transformation. Instead of experiencing themselves as isolated individuals struggling to survive in a hostile world, they describe awareness as naturally open, compassionate, and connected to all of existence. Dr. Judson Brewer's research on the neuroscience of enlightenment attempts to understand these transformative changes from a scientific perspective. His studies suggest that what contemplative traditions call awakening corresponds to a shift in the brain's default mode of operation, from self-centered processing to a more open and integrated form of awareness. Interestingly, these advanced states of consciousness share many features with the expanded awareness reported during psychedelic experiences, near-death experiences, and other extraordinary states. Common elements include the dissolution of ego boundaries, feelings of universal love and connection, and a profound sense that consciousness is far more fundamental than previously imagined. This convergence of findings from different research domains suggests that consciousness might indeed possess natural capacities for transcendence that can be accessed through various means. Whether through meditation, psychedelics, near-death experiences, or other consciousness-altering practices, people consistently report discovering aspects of awareness that exceed the boundaries of ordinary experience. The practical question becomes how to integrate these insights into daily life in ways that are beneficial and sustainable. Dr. Michael Mithofer's research on MDMA-assisted psychotherapy provides one model, using controlled psychedelic experiences within a therapeutic framework to facilitate healing and personal growth. But integration of expanded consciousness need not require dramatic interventions. Simple practices like mindfulness meditation, spending time in nature, creative expression, and acts of service can all serve as gateways to more expansive states of awareness. Dr. Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion reveals that even basic practices of treating oneself with kindness can create significant shifts in consciousness and well-being. When we learn to relate to our own experiences with the same care we would show a good friend, consciousness naturally becomes more open and less defensive. The cultivation of gratitude, studied extensively by Dr. Robert Emmons at UC Davis, represents another accessible pathway to expanded consciousness. Regular gratitude practice appears to shift attention away from what is lacking toward appreciation for what is present, creating a more abundant and connected state of awareness. Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky's research on positive psychology demonstrates that happiness and well-being are not just byproducts of favorable circumstances, but can be consciously cultivated through specific practices and perspectives. The quality of consciousness we bring to our experiences turns out to be at least as important as the experiences themselves. These findings suggest that consciousness research is not just an academic pursuit, but a practical investigation into how we might live more fulfilling and meaningful lives. By understanding how awareness operates and what expands or contracts it, we can learn to navigate life with greater wisdom and compassion. The study of consciousness has also revealed its profound connection to creativity and innovation. Dr. Anna Dietrich's research on the neuroscience of creativity shows that creative insights often emerge during states of reduced cognitive control, when the brain's usual filtering mechanisms are relaxed and novel associations can form. Many artists, scientists, and inventors report that their most important insights come not through deliberate effort, but through states of expanded awareness, where solutions seem to arrive from beyond ordinary thinking. Nikola Tesla, for example, described visualizing his inventions in complete detail before building them, as if accessing blueprints from some other dimension of consciousness. Dr. John Kunios's research on the aha moment reveals that creative insights are preceded by specific patterns of brain activity, including bursts of high-frequency gamma waves that seem to represent the sudden integration of previously disconnected information. These moments of creative breakthrough appear to involve temporary expansions of consciousness that allow new perspectives to emerge. The practical implications are significant. Environments and practices that expand consciousness, from meditation and nature exposure to certain types of music and art, can enhance creativity and problem-solving abilities. Educational approaches that cultivate expanded awareness might unlock human potential in ways we are only beginning to understand. Dr. Shelley Carson's research at Harvard University on cognitive disinhibition shows that reduced mental filtering, while sometimes associated with mental health challenges, can also enhance creativity and innovation. The key appears to be developing the ability to consciously modulate consciousness, expanding it when innovation is needed and focusing it when concentration is required. This points toward a more nuanced understanding of consciousness as a capacity that can be skillfully adjusted depending on circumstances. Rather than being stuck in a single mode of awareness, we might learn to access different states of consciousness as tools for different purposes. The research suggests that consciousness is not a fixed property, but a dynamic capacity that can be developed throughout life. Like learning to play a musical instrument, we can become more skillful in the art of awareness itself, discovering new octaves of experience and expression. Dr. Ken Wilber's integral theory proposes that consciousness develops through recognizable stages, from self-centered awareness through care for others, and eventually to what he calls cosmic consciousness, where the individual realizes their fundamental unity with all existence. While such stages remain difficult to study scientifically, they provide a framework for understanding consciousness as an evolving capacity rather than a static phenomenon. The investigation of consciousness has also led to new perspectives on death and what might survive the dissolution of the physical body. While science cannot definitively answer questions about life after death, consciousness research has revealed that awareness is far more mysterious and resilient than materialist approaches suggest. Dr. Bruce Grayson's decades of research on near-death experiences has documented cases where consciousness appears to function clearly even when brain activity is severely compromised or absent. His careful documentation of these experiences has challenged the assumption that consciousness is simply produced by brain activity and must cease when the brain dies. The transformative effects of near-death experiences provide additional evidence for consciousness's remarkable resilience and adaptability. People who have NDEs often return with radically expanded perspectives on life and death, reduced fear of mortality, and enhanced spiritual awareness. These changes typically persist for the remainder of their lives, suggesting that consciousness can be permanently transformed by brief encounters with expanded states. Dr. Pim van Lommel's prospective study of cardiac arrest patients found that those who had near-death experiences showed different patterns of brain activity even before their cardiac events, suggesting that some people might be naturally more susceptible to expanded states of consciousness. The research on NDEs has also revealed intriguing cases of shared death experiences, where family members or caregivers report accompanying dying loved ones into expanded states of consciousness. Dr. Raymond Moody's investigation of these experiences suggests that consciousness might sometimes extend beyond individual boundaries, creating shared fields of awareness. While such phenomena challenge conventional scientific assumptions, they align with insights from quantum physics about the interconnected nature of reality. If consciousness is indeed fundamental to the universe, then individual awareness might be more like waves on an ocean than separate entities, capable of merging and sharing under certain circumstances. The practical implications of consciousness research extend to how we approach dying and death in our culture. Hospice workers report that patients who are familiar with expanded states of consciousness often experience more peaceful and meaningful deaths, as if their prior experiences with transcendent awareness provide a template for the ultimate transition. Dr. Christopher Kerr's research on end-of-life dreams and visions has documented how dying patients often experience visits from deceased loved ones and profound spiritual experiences in their final days. These experiences typically bring comfort and closure, suggesting that consciousness might naturally expand as it approaches the transition from life. The study of consciousness in extreme states, whether near death, under anesthesia, or in coma, continues to challenge our basic assumptions about the relationship between brain and mind. Cases of terminal lucidity, where people with severe dementia suddenly regain clarity before death, suggest that consciousness might be more independent of brain function than we typically assume. Dr. Alexander Bathiani's research on these cases has found that they occur across different types of dementia and brain damage, implying that consciousness might have access to information and capabilities that are not dependent on the specific neural structures typically associated with cognition and memory. These findings do not necessarily support any particular view about life after death, but they do suggest that consciousness is far more mysterious and resilient than reductionist approaches acknowledge. The relationship between brain and mind appears to be more complex and nuanced than simple production or generation models can explain. As we explore these mysteries of consciousness tonight, perhaps the most important insight is that awareness itself is the most precious gift we possess. Every moment of conscious experience, from the most ordinary to the most transcendent, represents an extraordinary flowering of cosmic possibility. The fact that the universe has evolved beings capable of contemplating their own existence, of questioning the nature of reality, of experiencing beauty, love, and wonder, suggests that consciousness is not an accident, but perhaps the very purpose toward which existence unfolds. Dr. Christoph Koh, in his book The Feeling of Life Itself, argues that consciousness is what gives meaning and the value to existence. Without awareness to experience it, the universe would be merely a vast collection of unconscious matter and energy, magnificent perhaps in its complexity, but empty of significance. But with consciousness, the universe becomes aware of its own beauty. Through conscious beings, cosmic evolution has produced witnesses capable of appreciating the elegance of natural laws, the majesty of galaxies, the delicate intricacy of living cells, and the profound mystery of existence itself. You are one of these witnesses, a temporary focal point through which the universe comes to know itself. Your consciousness, with all its unique patterns of thought and feeling, represents a perspective on reality that has never existed before and will never exist again in quite the same way. As you drift deeper into the gentle embrace of sleep tonight, remember that you are not just a biological organism shutting down for maintenance, but a magnificent expression of cosmic consciousness, exploring the infinite landscape of possibility. Your dreams tonight will be another chapter in the universe's ongoing autobiography, written in the language of symbols, emotions, and impossible experiences. The research we've explored together reveals consciousness as simultaneously intimate and universal, personal and cosmic, bounded and limitless. It is the closest thing to us, the very medium through which we know anything at all, yet it remains fundamentally mysterious, always exceeding our attempts to fully grasp or explain it. Dr. Thomas Nagel's famous question, "What is it like to be a bat?" illustrates consciousness's essential subjectivity. We can study the neural correlates of bat consciousness, map their brain activity and understand their echolocation abilities, but we can never directly access the felt experience of being a bat, the particular quality of what it is like to navigate the world through sound rather than sight. This limitation applies to human consciousness as well. No amount of objective study can fully capture the subjective reality of what it feels like to be you. Your consciousness remains a private universe, accessible only from the inside, knowable only through direct experience. Yet consciousness research has revealed that this apparent privacy might be less absolute than we typically assume. Studies of empathy show that we possess remarkable abilities to attune to others' emotional states, sometimes even mirroring their neural activity through processes we do not fully understand. Dr. Marco Iacoboni's research on mirror neurons reveals that our brains automatically simulate others' actions and emotions, creating a kind of neural empathy that connects us more deeply than we might realize. When you watch someone else experience pain or joy, specific regions of your brain activate as if you were having those experiences yourself. This neural mirroring might represent a basic feature of consciousness, a tendency toward connection and resonance that operates below the threshold of ordinary awareness. If so, the sense of being completely separate individuals might be another useful illusion, masking a deeper reality of interconnection and shared experience. The contemplative traditions have long taught that the ultimate realization is recognizing the illusory nature of separation itself. From this perspective, individual consciousness is not something we have, but something we are expressions of, temporary modifications in an infinite field of awareness. Modern consciousness research, while unable to prove such metaphysical claims, has certainly made them more plausible by revealing the constructed nature of the self and the fluid boundaries of awareness. What seemed like solid facts about consciousness turn out to be malleable features that can change dramatically under different conditions. The plasticity of consciousness offers hope for human development and transformation. If awareness can be expanded, refined, and transformed through practice and experience, then we might be capable of far greater wisdom, compassion, and creativity than we currently demonstrate. Dr. Daniel Siegel's research on mindsight describes the ability to see the internal world of self and others with clarity and compassion. This capacity, which can be developed through practice, allows people to navigate relationships and challenges with greater skill and understanding. The development of such capacities might be crucial for addressing the complex challenges facing humanity in the 21st century. Problems like climate change, social inequality, and potential conflicts with artificial intelligence require forms of wisdom and cooperation that transcend narrow self-interest. Consciousness research suggests that such wisdom is not just an ideal but a natural potential of awareness itself. When consciousness expands beyond identification with separate selfhood, people consistently report increased concern for others and for the planet as a whole. Dr. David Loy's research on ecological consciousness explores how expanded awareness naturally leads to environmental concern and sustainable behavior. When people experience their fundamental interconnection with nature, protecting the environment becomes as natural as protecting their own bodies. This connection between consciousness and environmental awareness points towards one of the most important applications of consciousness research. As we face unprecedented ecological challenges, understanding how to cultivate more expanded and connected forms of awareness might be essential for our collective survival. The traditional ecological knowledge of indigenous cultures, which emerges from consciousness practices that emphasize connection with the natural world, offers important guidance for developing more sustainable relationships with the Earth. These practices recognize consciousness as embedded within rather than separate from the natural systems that sustain life. Dr. Robin Wall, Kimmerer's research on indigenous plant knowledge reveals sophisticated understanding of consciousness as a property shared by all living beings. From this perspective, plants, animals, and even landscape features possess their own forms of awareness that can be communicated with through appropriate practices. While such ideas challenge Western scientific assumptions about consciousness being limited to animals with complex nervous systems, recent research has begun to document information processing capabilities in plants that suggest more complex forms of awareness than previously recognized. Dr. Monica Galliano's research on plant cognition has shown that plants can learn, remember, and make decisions in ways that suggest rudimentary forms of consciousness. While plant awareness would presumably be very different from human consciousness, it might represent another expression of the same fundamental property of existence. The possibility that consciousness exists throughout nature rather than being limited to brains opens up radically different ways of understanding our place in the world. Instead of being the only conscious beings in an unconscious universe, we might be participants in a vast community of awareness that includes all living systems. This perspective finds support in some interpretations of quantum mechanics, particularly those that emphasize the role of consciousness in determining physical outcomes. If consciousness is indeed fundamental to reality, then every level of existence, from subatomic particles to galaxies, might possess some form of awareness. Dr. Stuart Kaufman's research on the adjacent possible in biological evolution suggests that consciousness might be one of the fundamental forces driving the increasing complexity and creativity of natural systems. As evolution produces more complex forms of awareness, new possibilities for experience and behavior emerge. The universe appears to be engaged in an ongoing exploration of consciousness, discovering new ways for awareness to know itself through increasingly sophisticated forms of life. From this perspective, human consciousness represents not the endpoint of evolution, but perhaps just the beginning of a much larger adventure. As consciousness research continues to evolve, it is revealing connections between mind and cosmos that previous generations could only imagine. The quantum mechanical properties of reality, the information theoretic nature of existence, and the mysterious relationship between observer and observed all point toward consciousness as a key feature of the universe's deepest structure. Dr. Freeman Dyson, the renowned physicist, once observed that the universe appears to be designed for the emergence of consciousness and intelligence. The precise fine-tuning of physical constants that allows complex structures to form, the self-organizing properties of matter and energy, and the remarkable emergence of awareness from cosmic evolution all suggest that consciousness might be written into the fundamental laws of nature. Whether or not such teleological interpretations are correct, consciousness research has certainly revealed that awareness is far more central to existence than reductionist approaches suggest. The hard problem of consciousness, the explanatory gap between brain and mind, remains as challenging as ever despite decades of intensive research. This gap might not represent a temporary limitation of current knowledge, but rather a fundamental feature of reality itself. Consciousness might be one of those phenomena, like quantum mechanics or the beginning of the universe, that simply cannot be fully understood from within the conceptual frameworks available to finite minds. Yet this limitation need not be a source of frustration. The mystery of consciousness is also its glory, the source of the wonder and awe that make life meaningful. If consciousness were completely explicable, reduced to nothing but neural mechanisms and information processing, something essential would be lost from human experience. Dr. David Chalmers argues that consciousness might require what he calls a fundamental expansion of our scientific worldview, incorporating subjective experience as a basic feature of reality, rather than something that can be explained away in purely objective terms. This expansion would not abandon scientific rigor, but rather extend it to include first-person methodology alongside third-person observation. Contemplative traditions have developed sophisticated methods for investigating consciousness from the inside. The study of consciousness has also revealed its intimate relationship with language and the construction of meaning. Dr. Andy Clark's research on extended mind theory suggests that consciousness does not end at the boundaries of the skull but extends into the tools and symbols we use to think and communicate. From this perspective, the words you're hearing right now are not just external sounds but extensions of consciousness itself, temporary modifications in the field of awareness that connect your mind with mine across space and time. Language becomes a technology for sharing consciousness, allowing insights and experiences to propagate from one mind to another. Dr. Merlin. Donald's research on the evolution of human consciousness traces how the development of symbolic thought and external memory systems has fundamentally transformed the nature of human awareness. We do not just use language and symbols to communicate about consciousness, we use them to extend and amplify consciousness itself. The written word, artistic expression, scientific theories, and digital technologies all serve as external scaffolding for consciousness, allowing it to transcend the limitations of individual brains and create collective forms of awareness. The Internet, from this perspective, might represent an early stage in the evolution of a global consciousness network. Dr. Peter Russell's research on global brain theory explores how information technologies might be creating new forms of collective consciousness at planetary scale. As billions of human minds become interconnected through digital networks, we might be witnessing the emergence of a new kind of awareness that transcends individual boundaries. While such ideas remain speculative, they reflect consciousness research's tendency to reveal connections and patterns that extend far beyond what we initially expect. The study of individual awareness leads naturally to questions about collective consciousness, cosmic consciousness, and the ultimate nature of reality itself. These expanded perspectives on consciousness have profound implications for how we understand our responsibilities and possibilities as conscious beings. If awareness is indeed fundamental to existence, then the quality of consciousness we cultivate affects not just our personal well-being, but the well-being of the larger systems of which we are part. Research on the effects of meditation and contemplative practice consistently shows that individuals who develop expanded consciousness also demonstrate increased concern for others and for the environment. This appears to be a natural consequence of recognizing the interconnected nature of existence rather than something that must be imposed through moral rules or social pressure. Dr. Daniel Siegel's research on interpersonal neurobiology reveals how the development of consciousness in children depends crucially on attuned relationships with caregivers. consciousness appears to be not just an individual property, but a capacity that emerges from relational fields of awareness. This relational view of consciousness suggests that the quality of awareness we bring to our interactions with others directly influences the development of consciousness in everyone around us. We are not just individual observers of reality, but active participants in creating the consciousness of our communities and cultures. The implications for education, parenting, healthcare, and social policy are significant. Approaches that support the development of expanded, compassionate consciousness could create positive feedback loops that benefit individuals and society as a whole. Dr. Dan Siegel's research on mindful awareness has shown that even brief training in conscious attention can create lasting improvements in emotional regulation, social skills, and academic performance in children. These effects appear to result from changes in brain structure and function that support more integrated and flexible forms of consciousness. The cultivation of consciousness might therefore be one of the most important investments we can make in human development and social progress. Rather than focusing solely on the accumulation of knowledge and skills, educational approaches that emphasize the development of awareness itself could unlock human potential in unprecedented ways. This brings us to consider consciousness research's implications for artificial intelligence and the question of whether machines could ever become truly conscious. As AI systems become increasingly sophisticated, the question of machine consciousness is transitioning from science fiction to serious scientific inquiry. Dr. Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory provides one framework for evaluating machine consciousness by measuring the amount of integrated information a system generates. According to his calculations, current AI systems produce very little integrated information compared to biological brains, suggesting they lack genuine consciousness despite their impressive capabilities. However, IIT also predicts that sufficiently complex artificial systems could theoretically become conscious if they achieve the right kind of information integration. This raises profound ethical questions about our responsibilities toward potentially conscious machines and the rights such systems might possess. Dr. Susan Schneider's research on the hard problem of AI consciousness explores these questions from philosophical and practical perspectives. She argues that as AI systems become more sophisticated, we will need new methods for detecting consciousness that go beyond behavioral measures to assess the internal experience of artificial systems. The challenge is particularly acute because consciousness is known only through first-person experience. We cannot directly observe consciousness in other humans, much less in artificial systems. We infer consciousness in others based on behavior, reports, and similarity to our own experience, but these methods might be inadequate for radically different forms of artificial intelligence. Some researchers have proposed that the development of artificial consciousness might require new approaches that incorporate insights from consciousness research. Rather than simply increasing computational power or complexity, artificial consciousness might require specific architectural features that support the integration and unity characteristic of biological awareness. Dr. Christoph Koch's research suggests that consciousness might be substrate independent, meaning it could theoretically emerge in silicon-based systems as well as carbon-based ones. However, the specific organizational principles that give rise to consciousness in biological systems might need to be carefully replicated in artificial ones. The question of artificial consciousness connects to broader issues about the future of consciousness in the universe. As both biological and artificial systems become more sophisticated, we might be approaching a phase transition in the evolution of awareness itself. Dr. Nick Bostrom's research on existential risk includes scenarios where advanced AI systems could either enhance human consciousness or potentially replace it entirely. The outcome might depend crucially on whether we develop AI systems that complement and amplify human awareness rather than competing with it. The integration of human and artificial consciousness might require unprecedented levels of cooperation and wisdom. Understanding the nature of consciousness through scientific research could be crucial for navigating these challenges successfully. But perhaps the most important application of consciousness research lies not in external technologies, but in the development of consciousness itself. The research suggests that awareness is not a fixed property, but a capacity that can be expanded and refined throughout life. Dr. Richard Davidson's research on neuroplasticity demonstrates that the brain remains capable of dramatic transformation even in old age. Regular meditation practice can create structural changes that support more integrated and resilient forms of consciousness well into the later decades of life. The cultivation of consciousness might therefore be one of the most practical and beneficial pursuits available to human beings. Rather than seeking happiness and fulfillment through external achievements or acquisitions, consciousness research suggests that the deepest satisfaction comes from developing awareness itself. This development appears to follow recognizable patterns across different approaches and traditions. Initial stages typically involve learning to stabilize attention and develop present moment awareness. Intermediate stages include the cultivation of positive emotions like compassion and gratitude, along with insights into the constructed nature of the self. Advanced stages, reported by long-term practitioners across various traditions, involve what might be called the naturalization of expanded consciousness. Instead of being special states that require effort to access, expanded awareness becomes the natural resting state of consciousness. Dr. Michael Mrazek's research on contemplative education has shown that even modest amounts of mindfulness training can create significant improvements in attention, emotional regulation, and academic performance. These benefits appear to result from changes in consciousness that ripple out to affect every aspect of experience. The research suggests that consciousness development is not just personally beneficial but socially necessary. Many of the challenges facing humanity, from interpersonal conflict to environmental destruction, appear to stem from contracted forms of consciousness that prioritize narrow self-interest over broader well-being. Dr. Otto Scharmer's research on presencing describes how expanded consciousness can create new possibilities for social innovation and collective action. When groups of people learn to access deeper levels of awareness together, they often discover creative solutions to problems that seemed intractable from more limited perspectives. The cultivation of collective consciousness might be essential for addressing challenges that require unprecedented levels of cooperation and coordination. Climate change, global health, and economic inequality all represent problems that can only be solved through forms of collective intelligence that transcend traditional boundaries. Consciousness research provides tools and insights for developing such collective intelligence. By understanding how individual awareness can expand beyond ego boundaries, we might learn to create social and political systems that operate from more inclusive and more integrated forms of consciousness. The implications extend to questions about the ultimate purpose and direction of human development. If consciousness is indeed fundamental to reality, then its cultivation might represent the most important work human beings can undertake, both individually and collectively. Dr. Ken Wilber's integral theory describes human development as fundamentally about the expansion of consciousness from self-centered awareness through care for others and eventually to cosmic consciousness. While such stages remain difficult to verify scientifically, they provide a framework for understanding human potential that goes far beyond conventional psychology. The research on consciousness transformation suggests that such development is not just possible but perhaps inevitable, given the right conditions and practices. Throughout history, individuals who have dedicated themselves to consciousness development have consistently reported similar insights about the nature of reality and the possibilities for human flourishing. These insights typically include the recognition that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but rather expressed through it, that individual awareness is part of a larger field of consciousness, and that the cultivation of love and wisdom represents the natural direction of consciousness development. While science cannot validate such claims directly, consciousness research has certainly made them more plausible by revealing the malleable nature of awareness and its capacity for profound transformation. The mystery of consciousness remains, but it is a mystery that invites exploration rather than passive acceptance. As you continue your gentle drift towards sleep tonight, you're participating in one of consciousness's most remarkable transformations. The awareness that is listening to these words will soon shift into the strange logic of dreams, where consciousness explores realities unconstrained by physical law. In your dreams tonight, you might fly through impossible landscapes, meet people who exist only in memory, or discover solutions to problems that have puzzled your waking mind. The dreaming brain creates entire worlds of experience, complete with sensory detail, emotional meaning, and narrative coherence, all arising from the creative capacity of consciousness itself. Dr. Deirdre Barrett's research on problem-solving dreams has documented cases where people receive important insights and creative solutions during sleep. The relaxed awareness of the dreaming state appears to allow consciousness to make connections and discover patterns that are not accessible to more focused waking attention. Your dreams represent another frontier in consciousness research, a nightly laboratory where awareness experiments with different forms of experience and expression. Some researchers propose that dreams serve as a kind of consciousness training ground, allowing the mind to practice navigating various scenarios and emotional states. The research on lucid dreaming has shown that consciousness can maintain different levels of awareness simultaneously. Lucid dreamers report being fully aware that they are dreaming while remaining immersed in the dream experience. This suggests that consciousness is more flexible and multifaceted than our ordinary experience indicates. Dr. Stephen LaBerge's research has documented how lucid dreamers can learn to control their dream experiences, exploring fantasy worlds, practicing skills, and even conducting experiments on the nature of dream consciousness. Some practitioners report using lucid dreams for spiritual practice, creative exploration, and psychological healing. The boundary between waking and sleeping consciousness is more permeable than we typically realize. Throughout the night, consciousness shifts through various stages, from light sleep where it remains somewhat connected to external stimuli, to deep sleep where it withdraws into restorative oblivion, to REM sleep where it creates elaborate alternate realities. Each of these states offers its own insights into the nature of awareness. Deep sleep reveals consciousness's capacity for complete self-transcendence, a state where individual awareness dissolves into pure rest. REM sleep demonstrates consciousness's unlimited creativity, its ability to generate any conceivable experience from the raw material of memory and imagination. The hypnagogic state, that twilight zone between waking and sleeping, offers perhaps the most accessible glimpse into consciousness's more fluid possibilities. As you drift through this liminal space tonight, you might notice how thoughts become more associative, how images arise spontaneously, how the usual rules of logic and causation begin to relax. Many artists, scientists, and inventors have learned to harvest insights from this transitional state of consciousness. Salvador Dali famously napped with a key in his hand, waking himself at the moment of sleep on set to capture the surreal imagery that arose during the hypnagogic transition. Dr. Michelle Carr's research on hypnagogic creativity has shown that this state is characterized by specific patterns of brain activity that support the formation of novel associations and insights. The relaxation of cognitive control allows consciousness to explore connections that would be inhibited during more focused states of awareness. As you enter this creative threshold tonight, your consciousness is naturally opening to possibilities that exceed the boundaries of ordinary thinking. The same awareness that navigates your daily life is discovering new territories of experience, new ways of knowing and being that expand the horizons of what seems possible. This expansion of possibility is perhaps consciousness research's most important gift. By revealing the malleable nature of awareness and its capacity for transcendence, the scientific study of consciousness has restored a sense of wonder and potential to human experience. We are not just biological machines grinding through predetermined programs, but conscious beings capable of transformation, transcendence, and creative participation in the ongoing evolution of awareness itself. Each moment of conscious experience represents an opportunity to explore new possibilities and contribute to the universe's growing understanding of its own nature. The research we have explored tonight reveals consciousness as simultaneously intimate and cosmic, personal and universal, bounded and limitless. It is the most familiar aspect of existence, yet it remains fundamentally mysterious, always exceeding our attempts to completely grasp or explain it. Dr. Antonio Damasio's research on the feeling of what happens describes consciousness as the universe's way of creating inner life, transforming mere information processing into genuine experience. Through consciousness, the cosmos has evolved the capacity to feel, to know, to wonder about its own existence. You embody this cosmic capacity right now as you listen to these words and feel the gentle pull of sleep. Your consciousness is a temporary flowering of universal awareness, a brief candle flame illuminating the infinite darkness with its own unique light. The journey we have taken together tonight through the landscapes of consciousness research reveals that awareness is far stranger and more wonderful than our everyday experience suggests. From quantum processes in microscopic cellular structures to cosmic patterns of meaning and connection, consciousness appears to operate across scales and dimensions that challenge our ordinary understanding. Yet consciousness research also reveals the profound ordinariness of extraordinary experience. The capacity for transcendence, for expanded awareness, for deep connection and understanding appears to be natural to consciousness itself, rather than requiring special conditions or abilities. As you settle into sleep tonight, remember that you're not just resting a tired body, but allowing consciousness to explore new territories of experience. Your dreams will be another chapter in the universe's ongoing autobiography, written in symbols and sensations that reveal aspects of reality hidden from waking awareness. The scientific study of consciousness has revealed that awareness is not confined to the individual brain, but extends through relationships, cultures, ecosystems, and perhaps throughout the cosmos itself. We are not separate islands of consciousness, but waves in an infinite ocean of awareness, temporarily individuated but never truly divided. This recognition transforms not just how we understand consciousness, but how we understand our place and purpose in existence. If we are expressions of cosmic consciousness exploring its own possibilities, then every experience, every insight, every moment of growth and understanding contributes to the universe's expanding self-knowledge. The cultivation of consciousness therefore becomes not just a personal practice, but a cosmic responsibility. By developing greater awareness, compassion and wisdom, we participate in the universe's own evolution toward greater complexity, beauty and understanding. Dr. Brian Swimmer's research on the universe story describes consciousness as the latest chapter in cosmic evolution, the way the universe has learned to reflect upon its own magnificent unfolding. From this perspective, consciousness research is really cosmology conducted from the inside, the universe studying itself through the medium of aware beings. As you drift deeper into sleep tonight, you join a vast community of consciousness that spans not just the globe, but perhaps the entire cosmos. Every sleeping mind represents another laboratory, where awareness explores new possibilities, discovers new connections, and contributes to the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. The research we have explored suggests that consciousness is simultaneously the most personal and most universal aspect of existence. Your awareness right now is uniquely yours, filtered through your particular nervous system and shaped by your individual history and culture. Yet it is also an expression of the same fundamental consciousness that animates every aware being throughout space and time. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's research on morphic resonance proposes that consciousness creates fields of influence that connect similar forms of awareness across distance and time. While controversial, this theory attempts to explain how insights and behaviors can spread through populations without direct communication. Whether or not such fields exist, consciousness research has clearly documented how states of awareness can propagate through social networks and cultural systems. The quality of consciousness cultivated by individuals has ripple effects that extend far beyond their immediate experience. This suggests that consciousness development is not just a private matter, but a contribution to the collective evolution of awareness. Every moment of greater clarity, compassion, or understanding adds to the sum total of consciousness available in the universe. The responsibility is both humbling and inspiring. As conscious beings, we have the capacity to expand awareness not just for ourselves, but for the larger systems of which we are part. Our thoughts, emotions, and actions become contributions to the ongoing exploration of consciousness's possibilities. Dr. Larry Doss's research on distant healing and prayer suggests that consciousness might indeed have effects that transcend spatial boundaries. While such phenomena remain controversial, they point toward the possibility that expanded consciousness might be capable of influencing physical reality in ways we do not yet understand. The research on healing at a distance, while limited and disputed, raises important questions about the scope and limitations of conscious influence. If consciousness can affect physical processes beyond the individual body, it would represent a fundamental revision of our understanding of causation and the relationship between mind and matter. Even if such effects prove to be illusory, the research on consciousness and healing has revealed the profound ways that states of awareness influence health and well-being within the individual. The quality of consciousness we bring to each moment literally shapes our physiology, affecting everything from immune function to genetic expression. Dr. Herbert Benson's research on the relaxation response demonstrates how simple changes in consciousness can trigger powerful healing mechanisms in the body. The same awareness that allows you to read these words and understand their meaning can be directed inward to promote healing, growth, and transformation. As consciousness research continues to mature, it is revealing awareness as perhaps the most practical and powerful capacity human beings possess. By learning to work skillfully with consciousness, we can enhance our health, improve our relationships, increase our creativity, and contribute to solutions for collective challenges. The tools and insights emerging from consciousness research offer hope for addressing many of the problems that seem intractable from more limited perspectives. When consciousness expands beyond ego boundaries, people consistently discover resources of wisdom, compassion, and creativity that were previously inaccessible. Dr. Thomas Keating's research on contemplative prayer describes how expanded consciousness naturally gives rise to what he calls the divine therapy, an automatic healing process that addresses psychological wounds and limitations at their deepest levels. Similar effects have been documented in secular mindfulness practices and psychedelic therapy. The common thread appears to be that consciousness, when freed from its usual defensive patterns and limiting beliefs, naturally moves towards greater integration, health, and well-being. The capacity for healing and transformation seems to be built into the very structure of awareness itself. This natural healing capacity of consciousness might be one of its most important features. Rather than requiring external interventions or complex treatments, many forms of psychological and even physical healing might be accessible through the skillful cultivation of awareness itself. The research on consciousness and aging provides particularly encouraging evidence for this possibility. Studies of contemplative practitioners show that regular meditation can slow or even reverse many of the cognitive changes typically associated with aging. The brain appears capable of maintaining youthful patterns of connectivity and function when consciousness is regularly exercised and expanded. Dr. Sarah Lazar's research has documented cases where 60-year-old meditators show brain structure similar to 25-year-olds in regions associated with attention and sensory processing. This suggests that consciousness might be one of the most powerful anti-aging interventions available, working not through external chemicals or procedures, but through the direct cultivation of awareness itself. The implications for how we understand human development and potential are profound. If consciousness can be developed throughout life, creating lasting improvements in cognitive function, emotional regulation, and physical health, then aging might represent not inevitable decline, but an opportunity for continued growth and refinement of awareness. Some research suggests that advanced practitioners of consciousness development actually show accelerated growth and insight in their later years, as if decades of practice create a momentum that continues to unfold new possibilities for understanding and expression. Dr. Gene Cohen's research on creativity and aging has documented how many people experience what he calls an encore period in their 60s and 70s, characterized by increased creativity, spiritual awareness, and desire to contribute to something larger than themselves. This pattern might reflect the natural maturation of consciousness as it becomes less identified with ego concerns and more connected to universal values. The study of consciousness development across the lifespan reveals awareness as a capacity that can continue growing and evolving until the moment of death and perhaps beyond. Rather than reaching a peak in early adulthood and then declining, consciousness might have the potential for unlimited development given the right conditions and practices. This view transforms aging from a process of loss and limitation into an opportunity for the deepest forms of consciousness development. The accumulated wisdom of a lifetime creates the foundation for insights and realizations that might not be possible in younger years. The research on consciousness and wisdom suggests that advanced practitioners often develop forms of understanding that integrate intellectual knowledge with emotional intelligence and spiritual insight. This synthetic wisdom appears to emerge naturally from the expansion and integration of consciousness rather than requiring separate cultivation. Dr. Dilip Yeste's research on the neuroscience of wisdom has identified specific brain changes associated with the development of wise perspective, including increased connectivity between regions involved in emotional regulation and cognitive control. Wisdom appears to represent a form of consciousness that balances analytical thinking with compassionate understanding. The development of wisdom consciousness might be particularly important for addressing the complex challenges of the modern world. Problems that cannot be solved through technical knowledge alone might yield to approaches that integrate multiple ways of knowing and being. Consciousness research suggests that such integrated approaches are not just possible but natural expressions of awareness's inherent capacity for synthesis and transcendence. When consciousness expands beyond narrow identification with particular perspectives or interests, it naturally discovers more comprehensive and effective ways of understanding and responding to challenges. The cultivation of what might be called collective wisdom consciousness could represent humanity's next evolutionary step. Rather than competing for scarce resources or defending narrow territorial interests, expanded consciousness naturally moves toward cooperation, sustainability, and care for the whole. Dr. Peter Senger's research on learning organizations explores how groups can develop collective intelligence that exceeds the sum of individual contributions. This appears to require forms of consciousness that emphasize dialogue, inquiry, and shared discovery rather than debate, advocacy, and individual achievement. The practical applications of consciousness research extend to every domain of human activity, from education and healthcare to business and governance. Approaches that support the development of expanded, integrated consciousness could create positive transformations in all these areas. But perhaps the most important application remains personal, the cultivation of consciousness in your own direct experience. The research reveals that every moment offers opportunities for expanding awareness, whether through simple mindfulness of breathing, gratitude for present blessings, or compassion for yourself and others. As you rest tonight, your consciousness will continue its eternal exploration, discovering new territories of experience in the realm of dreams. The same awareness that has accompanied you through all the moments of your life will venture into fantastical worlds where anything becomes possible. The boundary between sleeping and waking consciousness might be more artificial than we typically realize. Both states represent different modes of the same fundamental awareness, different ways that consciousness explores the infinite landscape of possibility. Your dreams tonight will add new chapters to the story consciousness tells about itself. New variations on the eternal themes of love, adventure, discovery, and transformation. Each dream scenario, no matter how bizarre or impossible, represents consciousness exploring what it might be like to experience reality from different perspectives and under different conditions. The creative capacity of dreaming consciousness reveals something profound about awareness itself. Without any external input, consciousness can generate complete sensory experiences, complex narratives, and profound emotional meaning. This suggests that the universe's capacity for creativity and transformation might be unlimited, expressing itself through every conscious being as an endless exploration of possibility. Dr. Robert Stickgold's research on sleep and consciousness reveals that the sleeping brain does not simply replay the events of the day, but actively reorganizes and integrates information in ways that create new understanding and insight. Sleep serves as a period of consciousness alchemy, transforming the raw material of experience into wisdom and understanding. The fact that we spend approximately 1/3 of our lives in altered states of consciousness suggests that these states are not optional additions to awareness, but essential aspects of how consciousness operates. Sleep, dreams, and transitional states might be as fundamental to consciousness as waking awareness. Some traditions describe enlightenment as the recognition that all states of consciousness, from ordinary waking to deep sleep to the most expanded, mystical experiences, are equally valid expressions of awareness's infinite nature. From this perspective, there is no hierarchy of states, only different ways consciousness explores its own possibilities. This recognition can transform how we relate to all aspects of experience, including those we typically resist or try to change. Pain, confusion, fear, and other challenging experiences become opportunities for consciousness to explore new territories rather than problems that need to be solved. Dr. Tara Brach's research on radical acceptance describes how consciousness naturally heals and transforms when we learn to meet all experiences with open awareness, rather than resistance or judgment. This acceptance does not mean passive resignation, but rather the courage to fully engage with whatever consciousness presents. The practice of conscious awareness in all circumstances allows consciousness to discover its inherent wholeness and resilience. Rather than being fragmented by difficult experiences, awareness learns to remain spacious and stable while various phenomena arise and pass away within it. This stability of consciousness represents one of the most practical benefits of consciousness research and development. Instead of being at the mercy of changing circumstances, thoughts, and emotions, we can learn to rest in the awareness that observes all these changes without being disturbed by them. Dr. Shinzen. Jung's research on equanimity describes this quality of consciousness as its natural resting state. When awareness is not contracted around particular content, it naturally expresses qualities of peace, clarity, and unconditional well-being that do not depend on external conditions. The development of such equanimous consciousness might be one of the most valuable skills a human being can cultivate. It provides a foundation of stability and well-being that remains accessible regardless of life circumstances. But equanimity in consciousness research does not mean indifference or detachment. Rather, it refers to a quality of awareness that can remain open and responsive while not being overwhelmed or destabilized by intense experiences. Dr. Paul Ekman's research on emotional awareness has shown that people who develop this kind of conscious stability actually become more emotionally intelligent and empathically sensitive rather than less. They can feel deeply without being controlled by their feelings, respond compassionately without being overwhelmed by others' pain. This emotional freedom appears to be one of consciousness's natural capacities, accessible through the simple practice of observing thoughts and feelings with curious, non-judgmental awareness rather than being immediately identified with them. As you notice your own consciousness shifting and relaxing tonight, you're experiencing this fundamental capacity for observation and disidentification. The awareness that notices thoughts arising and passing away is not itself a thought, but something more fundamental, the space within which all experiences occur. Some consciousness researchers describe this observing awareness as the true self, more fundamental than personality, memories, or any other contents of consciousness. From this perspective, who you really are is not the changing stream of experiences, but the unchanging awareness within which all experiences arise. Dr. Douglas Harding's research on headless experience explores this dimension of consciousness through simple experiments that reveal the empty, spacious nature of awareness itself. When you look for your head from the inside, you discover only open awareness, a transparent capacity for experiencing rather than anything that could be observed. This recognition of consciousness's essential nature as open awareness rather than a personal possession can be profoundly liberating. Instead of trying to improve or fix consciousness, we can simply recognize what it already is, discovering that the peace and freedom we seek are already present as the very foundation of experience. The research on consciousness reveals that this recognition is available to anyone regardless of education, background, or special abilities. Consciousness is not something we need to attain, but something we already are. Not something we need to develop, but something we can simply recognize more clearly. Dr. Francis Lucille's research on direct recognition of consciousness describes how this understanding can dawn in a moment, transforming not the content of experience, but the context within which all experience is understood. The same life circumstances that previously seemed problematic might suddenly be recognized as perfect expressions of consciousness exploring its own nature. This transformation of understanding rather than circumstance represents one of consciousness research's most elegant insights. Instead of needing to change the world to find peace and fulfillment, we can change our relationship to experience by recognizing the aware presence within which all experiences arise. The practice of resting as awareness itself, rather than trying to modify or improve awareness, has been described by many teachers and researchers as the most direct path to understanding consciousness's true nature. It requires no special knowledge, techniques, or abilities, only the willingness to notice what is already most intimately present. As your consciousness continues its gentle transition towards sleep tonight, you might experiment with simply resting as the awareness that is aware, noticing how this simple recognition brings a natural sense of peace and completeness that does not depend on any particular experience. This aware presence that you are is the same consciousness that has accompanied you through every moment of your life, from your earliest memories to this present instant. It is the constant factor in all the changes of experience, the unchanging witness to the endless flow of thoughts, sensations, emotions, and perceptions. Consciousness research reveals this witnessing awareness as perhaps the most fundamental aspect of existence, more basic than matter, energy, space, or time. All of these phenomena appear within consciousness, are known through consciousness, and might even be modifications of consciousness itself. The implications are staggering. If consciousness is indeed fundamental to reality, then each moment of awareness represents the universe coming to know itself more fully. Every insight, every experience of beauty or love, every moment of understanding contributes to cosmic evolution at the deepest level. You're not just experiencing consciousness, but embodying it, expressing it, and exploring its possibilities through your unique perspective and life circumstances. The research suggests that this is not metaphor, but literal truth, that consciousness uses biological forms to investigate its own infinite nature. Dr. Deepak Chopra's research on consciousness and quantum field theory proposes that individual awareness is like a localized disturbance in an infinite field of consciousness, temporally focused but never separate from the whole. Your personal consciousness and universal consciousness are not two different things, but the same awareness appearing at different scales. This recognition can transform how we understand death and the meaning of individual existence. If consciousness is fundamental rather than produced, then physical death might represent not the extinction of awareness, but its release from particular constraints and limitations. While science cannot prove survival of consciousness after death, consciousness research has certainly made such survival more plausible by revealing awareness as far more independent of brain function than materialist approaches suggest. The cases of terminal lucidity, near-death experiences, and expanded states all point toward consciousness as something that transcends rather than emerges from neural activity. Whether or not individual consciousness survives bodily death, the research reveals that we're already participating in something immortal, the eternal process by which awareness explores its own possibilities. Every moment of conscious experience adds to this exploration, contributing insights and perspectives that enrich the cosmic understanding. The recognition that consciousness might be eternal and universal, rather than temporary and personal, can be profoundly comforting, especially as we face the uncertainties and challenges of human existence. Rather than being isolated individuals struggling alone in an indifferent universe, we are expressions of cosmic consciousness exploring what it means to be aware. This perspective does not diminish the significance of individual experience, but rather reveals it as part of a larger tapestry of meaning and purpose. Your particular consciousness, with all its unique qualities and perspectives, represents an irreplaceable contribution to the universe's self-understanding. The research on consciousness suggests that every experience, no matter how ordinary or challenging, offers opportunities for greater understanding and appreciation of awareness itself. Pain teaches consciousness about its capacity for compassion. Joy reveals its natural luminosity. Confusion demonstrates its ability to transcend limitation through patient inquiry. From this perspective, life becomes a curriculum for consciousness development, each situation an opportunity to discover new depths and dimensions of awareness. The challenges we face are not obstacles to overcome, but invitations to expand beyond our current limitations and discover new possibilities for being and understanding. Dr. Richard Moss's research on conscious living describes how this shift in perspective can transform ordinary activities into opportunities for consciousness development. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on presence. Having a conversation becomes an exploration of connection. Even experiencing difficulty becomes a chance to discover awareness's natural resilience and compassion. The practical result of consciousness research and development is not withdrawal from life, but deeper engagement with it. As awareness expands and matures, people typically become more rather than less involved in creative work, relationships, and service to others. This engagement arises naturally from consciousness's inherent creativity and compassion, rather than from obligation or external pressure. When consciousness recognizes its fundamental interconnection with all existence, caring for others becomes as natural as caring for oneself. The research suggests that this expansion of concern and capability is not limited by age, background, or circumstances. Consciousness development appears to be accessible to anyone willing to explore awareness with patience, curiosity, and openness to discovery. Dr. Jack Cornfield's research on contemplative development has documented cases of profound transformation occurring at every stage of life, from young adults just beginning their exploration of consciousness to elderly practitioners discovering new depths of understanding in their final years. The key appears to be consistency and sincerity, rather than any particular method or tradition. Consciousness responds to genuine attention and care, regardless of the specific techniques employed. What matters is the quality of awareness brought to practice rather than the external forms of practice themselves. As you rest tonight, you're already engaging in one of the most fundamental forms of consciousness practice, the art of letting go. Sleep requires a willingness to release control, to trust consciousness to navigate new territories without the guidance of ordinary thinking. This letting go is both the simplest and most profound aspect of consciousness development. It requires no special knowledge or ability, only the courage to relax into awareness itself and discover what emerges when consciousness is allowed to express its natural creativity and wisdom. The research reveals that consciousness has its own intelligence, far exceeding the capacity of ordinary thinking. When we learn to trust this deeper intelligence and allow it to guide our lives, we discover resources of insight and capability that surprise and delight us. Dr. Eugene Gendlin's research on focusing describes how the body's felt sense can provide guidance that transcends rational analysis. By learning to attend to subtle physical sensations and emotions, people can access forms of knowing that integrate thinking with feeling in ways that lead to more complete understanding. This embodied consciousness represents another frontier in awareness research, the recognition that consciousness is not confined to the brain but extends throughout the entire body. Every cell might possess its own form of awareness that contributes to the overall symphony of conscious experience. Dr. Candace Pert's research on molecules of emotion demonstrates how consciousness and biochemistry are intimately intertwined throughout the body. Neuropeptides, the chemical messengers that carry emotional information, are found not just in the brain but in every organ system, suggesting that consciousness might be a whole-body phenomenon rather than something localized in the head. This embodied view of consciousness helps explain why physical practices like yoga, Tai Chi, and Qigong can have such profound effects on mental and emotional well-being. These ancient systems work directly with the body's consciousness, cultivating awareness through movement, breath, and posture, rather than through mental techniques alone. Dr. Peter Levine's research on trauma and the body reveals how consciousness can become trapped in physical patterns of tension and reactivity, and how gentle attention to bodily sensations can facilitate profound healing and liberation. The body holds not just physical memory, but consciousness itself, requiring approaches that honor both mental and somatic dimensions of awareness. The recognition of embodied consciousness also transforms how we understand the relationship between mind and physical health. Rather than seeing the body as a machine that occasionally breaks down, we can understand it as a conscious system that is constantly communicating through symptoms, sensations, and energy patterns. Dr. Gabor Mate's research on addiction and consciousness reveals how many forms of psychological suffering stem from disconnection, the loss of contact with our deeper nature and with the larger web of relationships that sustain life. Healing often involves not just addressing symptoms, but restoring consciousness to its natural state of openness and connection. This understanding of consciousness as fundamentally relational, rather than individual, has profound implications for how we approach healing, education, and social change. Instead of treating problems as located within isolate, this understanding of consciousness as fundamentally relational rather than individual has profound implications for how we approach healing, education, and social change. Instead of treating problems as located within isolated individuals, we can recognize them as disruptions in the larger field of consciousness that connects us all. The research on collective consciousness and social transformation suggests that changes in individual awareness can ripple outward to affect entire communities and cultures. When enough people in a system develop expanded consciousness, the entire system can undergo rapid transformation. Dr. Duane. Elgin's research on collective consciousness evolution describes how humanity might be approaching a phase transition where expanded consciousness becomes the norm rather than the exception. The increasing interest in mindfulness, meditation, psychedelic research, and consciousness studies might reflect the early stages of such a transformation. If consciousness is indeed evolving toward greater complexity and integration, we might be living through one of the most significant transitions in the history of awareness itself. The choices we make about how to develop and apply consciousness could influence the trajectory of evolution for generations to come. The responsibility is both daunting and inspiring. As conscious beings living at this crucial moment in history, we have the opportunity to participate directly in consciousness evolution. Our individual development of awareness contributes to the larger transformation that might determine humanity's future. But consciousness research also reveals that this responsibility need not be experienced as a burden. The cultivation of awareness is inherently joyful and fulfilling, bringing natural rewards that motivate continued exploration and development. Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow states describes how consciousness naturally seeks experiences of optimal challenge and engagement. When awareness is fully absorbed in meaningful activity, people report feelings of timelessness, effortless concentration, and deep satisfaction that transcend ordinary pleasure. These flow states appear to represent consciousness operating at its optimal level, freed from the usual patterns of self-consciousness and distraction that limit its natural capacity for engagement and creativity. The research suggests that such states can be cultivated through proper attention to the conditions that support expanded awareness. The study of peak performance in various domains reveals consciousness as the key factor that distinguishes exceptional achievement from mere competence. Whether in sports, arts, sciences, or spiritual practice, breakthrough performance appears to emerge when consciousness transcends ordinary limitations and accesses deeper sources of capability. Dr. Michael Murphy's research on exceptional human capabilities documents cases where consciousness appears to transcend normal physical and mental constraints, enabling extraordinary feats of strength, endurance, creativity, and insight. While such cases are rare, they point toward potentials that might be latent in consciousness generally. The investigation of human potential through consciousness research reveals possibilities that exceed our ordinary assumptions about what human beings are capable of achieving. The development of awareness might unlock capacities that are currently dormant or accessible only under special circumstances. This exploration of consciousness's potential connects to larger questions about the purpose and direction of human evolution. If consciousness is indeed fundamental to reality, then its development might represent the universe's own evolutionary imperative, the direction toward which cosmic development naturally moves. Dr. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's research on cosmic evolution describes consciousness as the arrow of complexity, the force that drives the universe toward ever greater forms of organization and awareness. In his view, human consciousness represents an early stage in the emergence of a planetary mind that could eventually encompass the entire Earth. While such visions remain speculative, they illustrate how consciousness research opens up new possibilities for understanding our place and purpose in the cosmic story. Rather than being accidental byproducts of blind evolutionary forces, conscious beings might represent the universe's way of coming to know and appreciate its own magnificent complexity. The research on consciousness and meaning reveals that awareness naturally seeks purpose and significance, rather than mere survival or pleasure. Dr. Viktor Frankl's work with concentration camp survivors showed that people can endure almost any suffering if they can find meaning in their experience. This search for meaning appears to be a fundamental drive of consciousness, as basic as the need for food or shelter. Consciousness wants to understand its place in the larger scheme of things, to contribute to something greater than immediate self-interest. The development of expanded consciousness typically involves discovering this larger context of meaning and purpose. As awareness transcends ego boundaries, people naturally become interested in serving the well-being of others and participating in projects that benefit future generations. Dr. Abraham Maslow's research on self-actualization describes this as a natural stage of human development where consciousness moves beyond basic needs toward the realization of its inherent potential for creativity, wisdom, and service. This self-actualization is not selfish, but rather represents consciousness discovering its true nature as an expression of universal creativity. The research suggests that such self-actualization is not limited to exceptional individuals, but represents the natural direction of consciousness development when basic needs are met and appropriate support is available. Every human being carries the potential for profound consciousness development and the contribution to collective well-being that naturally flows from such development. This universal potential for consciousness development might be one of the most important insights emerging from awareness research. Rather than being a capacity limited to saints, geniuses, or specially gifted individuals, expanded consciousness appears to be the birthright of every aware being. The practical question becomes how to create conditions that support this natural development rather than inhibiting it. Dr. Daniel Siegel's research on interpersonal neurobiology reveals how relationships characterized by attunement, resonance, and trust create optimal conditions for consciousness development in both children and adults. Educational approaches that emphasize the development of awareness alongside the acquisition of knowledge might unlock human potential in unprecedented ways. Instead of simply filling minds with information, education could focus on expanding consciousness's natural capacity for learning, creativity, and wisdom. Dr. Parker Palmer's research on contemplative education explores how bringing mindfulness and reflection into learning environments can transform both teaching and learning. Students who learn to attend to their own consciousness while studying report deeper understanding, greater retention, and increased motivation. The integration of consciousness development into healthcare represents another promising frontier. Instead of treating symptoms in isolation, medical approaches that address consciousness directly might facilitate more complete and lasting healing. Dr. John Cabot. Zinn's research on mindfulness-based stress reduction demonstrates how simple consciousness practices can create significant improvements in both physical and mental health conditions. The cultivation of present moment awareness appears to activate natural healing mechanisms that are often suppressed by stress and distraction. The research on consciousness and immune function shows that states of expanded awareness can directly enhance the body's capacity for healing and regeneration. Meditation, prayer, and other consciousness practices appear to optimize the functioning of biological systems in ways that promote health and longevity. These findings suggest that consciousness development might be one of the most cost-effective and widely applicable interventions available for improving human health and well-being. Rather than requiring expensive technologies or complex treatments, the cultivation of awareness uses resources that are freely available to everyone. The democratizing potential of consciousness research is one of its most inspiring aspects. Unlike many other forms of human development that require special talents, extensive education, or favorable circumstances, consciousness development is accessible to anyone with the motivation to explore their own awareness. Dr. Richie Davidson's research on neuroplasticity has shown that even brief periods of consciousness training can create measurable improvements in brain function and emotional regulation. The brain's remarkable capacity for change means that consciousness development can begin at any moment and continue throughout life. This accessibility of consciousness development might be crucial for addressing the mental health challenges facing modern society. Rather than relying solely on pharmaceutical interventions or complex therapies, simple consciousness practices might provide tools for resilience and well-being that can be widely disseminated. The research on consciousness and social change suggests that such individual development inevitably leads to collective transformation. As more people develop expanded consciousness, social systems naturally become more compassionate, sustainable, and effective. Dr. Duane. Elgin's research on voluntary simplicity documents how consciousness development often leads to lifestyle changes that reduce consumption and environmental impact while increasing satisfaction and well-being. This appears to result not from moral obligation but from expanded awareness that naturally recognizes the interconnection between personal and planetary health. The cultivation of ecological consciousness might be essential for navigating the environmental challenges of the coming decades. Rather than requiring sacrifice or limitation, consciousness research suggests that sustainable living can emerge naturally from expanded awareness that includes environmental well-being within its circle of concern. This transformation of values and priorities through consciousness development points toward new models of human flourishing that emphasize inner development alongside external achievement. The research suggests that the deepest satisfaction comes not from accumulating experiences or possessions, but from developing the consciousness that experiences them. Dr. Tim Kasser's research on materialism and well-being has shown that people who prioritize external achievements and acquisitions report lower levels of happiness and life satisfaction than those who focus on relationships, personal growth, and meaningful work. consciousness development appears to naturally shift priorities towards what research reveals to be the genuine sources of human flourishing. The study of consciousness and happiness reveals that well-being is not something that can be pursued directly, but rather emerges as a natural consequence of expanded awareness. When consciousness develops beyond ego boundaries, people report a deep sense of contentment and joy that does not depend on external circumstances. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky's research on the architecture of sustainable happiness shows that lasting well-being comes primarily from the cultivation of positive mental states and meaningful relationships rather than from changes in life circumstances. This suggests that consciousness development might be the most direct path to the fulfillment that everyone seeks. The research also reveals that this development of consciousness benefits not just the individual, but everyone in their sphere of influence. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's work on positive emotions demonstrates how states like love, joy, and gratitude are literally contagious, spreading through social networks and elevating the consciousness of entire communities. This social dimension of consciousness development suggests that individual practice is never just personal, but always contributes to collective well-being. Every moment of expanded awareness raises the overall level of consciousness available in human society. As we explore these mysteries of consciousness tonight, perhaps the most important insight is that awareness itself is the most precious gift we possess. Every moment of conscious experience, from the most ordinary to the most transcendent, represents an extraordinary flowering of cosmic possibility. The fact that the universe has evolved beings capable of contemplating their own existence, of questioning the nature of reality, of experiencing beauty, love, and wonder, suggests that consciousness is not an accident, but perhaps the very purpose toward which existence unfolds. Dr. Christoph Koch, in his book The Feeling of Life Itself, argues that consciousness is what gives meaning and value to existence. Without awareness to experience it, the universe would be merely a vast collection of unconscious matter and energy, magnificent perhaps in its complexity but empty of significance. But with consciousness, the universe becomes aware of its own beauty. Through conscious beings, cosmic evolution has produced witnesses capable of appreciating the elegance of natural laws, the majesty of galaxies, the delicate intricacy of living cells, and the profound mystery of existence itself. You are one of these witnesses, a temporary focal point through which the universe comes to know itself. Your consciousness, with all its unique patterns of thought and feeling, represents a perspective on reality that has never existed before and will never exist again in quite the same way. As you drift deeper into the gentle embrace of sleep tonight, remember that you are not just a biological organism shutting down for maintenance, but a magnificent expression of cosmic consciousness exploring the infinite landscape of possibility. Your dreams tonight will be another chapter in the universe's ongoing autobiography, written in the language of symbols, emotions, and impossible experiences. The research we have explored together reveals consciousness as simultaneously intimate and universal, personal and cosmic, bounded and limitless. It is the closest thing to us, the very medium through which we know anything at all, yet it remains fundamentally mysterious, always exceeding our attempts to fully grasp or explain it. The journey we have taken tonight through the landscapes of consciousness research reveals that awareness is far stranger and more wonderful than our everyday experience suggests. From quantum processes in microscopic cellular structures to cosmic patterns of meaning and connection, consciousness appears to operate across scales and dimensions that challenge our ordinary understanding. Yet consciousness research also reveals the profound ordinariness of extraordinary experience. The capacity for transcendence, for expanded awareness, for deep connection and understanding appears to be natural to consciousness itself, rather than requiring special conditions or abilities. As you settle into sleep tonight, remember that you are not just resting a tired body, but allowing consciousness to explore new territories of experience. Your dreams will be another chapter in the universe's ongoing autobiography, written in symbols and sensations that reveal aspects of reality hidden from waking awareness. The scientific study of consciousness has revealed that awareness is not confined to the individual brain, but extends through relationships, cultures, ecosystems, and perhaps throughout the cosmos itself. We are not separate islands of consciousness, but waves in an infinite ocean of awareness, temporarily individuated but never truly divided. This recognition transforms not just how we understand consciousness, but how we understand our place and purpose in existence. If we are expressions of cosmic consciousness exploring its own possibilities, then every experience, every insight, every moment of growth and understanding contributes to the universe's expanding self-knowledge. The cultivation of consciousness, therefore, becomes not just a personal practice, but a cosmic responsibility. By developing greater awareness, compassion and wisdom, we participate in the universe's own evolution toward greater complexity, beauty and understanding. As you drift deeper into sleep tonight, you join a vast community of consciousness that spans not just the globe, but perhaps the entire cosmos. Every sleeping mind represents another laboratory where awareness explores new possibilities, discovers new connections, and contributes to the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. The research we have explored suggests that consciousness is simultaneously the most personal and most universal aspect of existence. Your awareness right now is uniquely yours, filtered through your particular nervous system and shaped by your individual history and culture. Yet it is also an expression of the same fundamental consciousness that animates every aware being throughout space and time. This paradox of being simultaneously individual and universal, unique and connected, bounded and limitless, appears to be fundamental to consciousness itself. The research suggests that recognizing and embracing this paradox might be key to understanding consciousness's true nature and possibilities. Dr. Richard Moss's research on the fear that is we describes how mature consciousness learns to appreciate both its individual specificity and its universal nature without trying to resolve the apparent contradiction. This both-and perspective allows consciousness to enjoy its uniqueness while remaining connected to the larger field of awareness. The practical result of this recognition is what researchers describe as integrated consciousness, awareness that can function effectively at individual and collective levels simultaneously. Such consciousness can attend to personal needs and responsibilities while remaining sensitive to the welfare of others and the environment. This integration appears to represent the natural direction of consciousness evolution, the way awareness learns to include ever wider circles of concern and capability within its sphere of attention and care. The research suggests that this expansion is not unlimited, but tends toward recognition of consciousness's fundamental interconnection with all existence. The ultimate stage of consciousness development, described across various research traditions, involves what Dr. Rupert Spira calls the recognition of being, the direct knowing of consciousness as the fundamental reality in which all experience arises and to which all experience returns. This recognition does not eliminate individual experience, but reveals it as a perfect expression of universal consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature. Personal life continues, but is understood as cosmic consciousness playing the role of an individual, rather than an individual struggling to understand cosmic consciousness. The research suggests that this recognition is available in every moment rather than being a distant goal that requires years of development to achieve. The consciousness that is reading these words right now is already the universal awareness that every tradition and research program is attempting to understand and cultivate. The only thing that might be needed is the simple willingness to recognize what is already most intimately present, to appreciate the awareness that makes all experience possible, to rest as the consciousness that you have always already been. As your awareness settles into the natural peace of its own being tonight, you join the eternal exploration of consciousness knowing itself through the magnificent adventure of individual experience. Your dreams will be another chapter in this cosmic autobiography, written in symbols and sensations that reveal new facets of awareness's infinite creativity. The research we have explored together reveals consciousness as simultaneously the most personal and most universal aspect of existence, the most familiar feature of experience and the deepest mystery of reality. Whether approached through scientific investigation or contemplative inquiry, consciousness remains wonderfully resistant to complete understanding while generously revealing practical insights that can transform every aspect of life. Tonight, as consciousness transitions from the focused awareness of waking life to the open creativity of dreams and the profound rest of deep sleep, you participate directly in the ongoing evolution of awareness itself. Every moment of recognition, every insight into consciousness's nature, every act of kindness that flows from expanded awareness contributes to the universe's growing understanding of its own magnificent potential. Rest well, fellow explorer of consciousness. Your awareness is both the instrument and the destination of this cosmic journey, both the question and the answer to the mystery of existence. In recognizing consciousness as what you are rather than what you have, you discover that you have always been what you were seeking, that the kingdom of awareness has always been spread before you, waiting only for the eyes to see. Sleep peacefully tonight, knowing that consciousness will continue its eternal exploration through the landscape of dreams, discovering new territories of possibility while remaining forever rooted in the unchanging awareness that is your deepest identity. Sweet dreams, conscious universe. Sweet dreams, aware cosmos. Sweet dreams, magnificent expression of infinite consciousness, temporarily focused through the beautiful illusion of individual existence. Tomorrow, when awareness returns to the focused attention of waking life, remember that you carry within you all the insights we have explored tonight. Consciousness research reveals that every discovery about awareness's nature and potential is not external knowledge, but recognition of what you already are. The mystery continues, and you're both its investigator and its revelation, both the seeker and the sought, both the dreamer and the dream in consciousness's endless exploration of its own infinite nature. The universe dreams through you tonight, consciousness exploring its latest possibilities through your unique perspective and experience. Rest in the profound ordinariness of this extraordinary mystery, and wake tomorrow with renewed appreciation for the magnificent gift of being aware in an aware cosmos. Sleep well, dear friend. Sleep well, fellow consciousness. Sleep well, universe dreaming of itself through the sacred vessel of your awareness. The mystery of consciousness continues its eternal dance, and you are both the dancer and the dance, both the knower and the known, both the experiencer and the experience in this magnificent exploration of what it means to be aware. From all of us here at The Calm Scientist, thank you for joining us on this gentle journey through the deepest questions and discoveries of consciousness research. Your presence has made this exploration more meaningful and complete. As you drift into the peaceful realm of sleep, remember that you are never alone in your awareness, but always part of the vast community of consciousness that spans all of existence. If tonight's journey has brought you comfort, curiosity, or that perfect drowsiness we hope for, please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating these peaceful expeditions through the landscapes of science and understanding. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're listening from, what time it is there, and share the weirdest dream you've ever had. I read every comment and love discovering the wonderful ways our minds explore the infinite territories of sleep and dreams. Until we meet again in the gentle space between waking and sleeping, this is your calm scientist wishing you the most peaceful of dreams and the most restorative of sleep. May consciousness carry you safely through the night, and may you wake tomorrow with wonder renewed and mystery embraced. Sweet dreams, beautiful awareness. Sweet dreams, infinite consciousness. Sweet dreams, dear friends, one and all.